Welcome everybody. Could I have your attention please? Please make sure all mobile phones are switched off as they do interrupt with our apparatus, so please be certain you've switched it off. Thank you all very much indeed. And welcome to the members, and we have quite an extended amount of people in the back there. If you can't hear, please raise your hand at the back, because sometimes they can't hear well enough of what has been said. Thank you. Right, apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Feakins.
Just one. Declarations of interest?
Yes, Madam Chairman. In relation to item 4.1, which is the proposed development at Devorden, one of the objectors, or a stranger if I met yesterday, was the deputy head teacher at the school, or I'm chair of governor's office, so I'm declaring that interest, and when it's up for discussion, I'll
leave the chamber. Thank you, Councillor Higginson. Councillor Harris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 4.5, the pavilion in Castle Grounds in Abergavenny. I haven't got a problem with the planning bit, but I was active in promoting the town agreeing to fund 30,000 towards the project, so it could be inferred that I've got a closed mind.
Right, thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor David Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm declaring interest on 4A and 4H as I'm a member of the Committee on Monmouthshire Housing.
Right, thank you,
and I will be leaving the room.
Right, thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Anne Webb.
Thank you. The same applications, Chairman. I'm on the board of Monmouthshire Housing. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Anyone else? Well, I myself am also declaring interest today on application 01741 at Devorden, 01777 at Raglan Castory Crescent, and 00168 also at Raglan, as they are members sort of my family, but, you know, different ones. So I shall leave the chamber, and I shall kindly hand it over to the Vice Chairman, Peter Clark, then, so that he will carry on the meeting. Now, as for introductions of people, especially as you all realise, we do live stream now, so there might be a lot of people looking in, especially if they've got an interest in it as well. I'm County Councillor Ruth Edwards, and to my right...
County Councillor Peter Clark.
My name is John Rogers. I'm Assistant Legal Department.
Thank you.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Mark Hand, Head of Planning, Housing and Place Shaping.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Roger Hoggins, Head of Operations.
Craig O'Connor, Development Management Area Manager.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager.
Shirley Wigham, Senior Strategy and Policy Officer Housing.
Louise Corbett, Housing Strategy.
Hugh Owen, Environmental Health.
Right, thank you all very much indeed for your introductions. And I will first of all do the minutes of the meeting that was held, for accuracy only, on the 5th of March. Do I take them as read, although I have had it drawn to my attention that there is one member of the committee wishes to have an amendment on page 20. Councillor Brown, would you like to state what you would wish to be amended?
Yeah, I think it says in one of the bullet points, it says this is on the infill policy. It says there is a need to ensure that either the 35% or 25% affordable housing provision is adhered to, and that it is not subject to viability. When Councillor Feakins made that comment, he's not actually here, he said 35%, 25% or whatever, because obviously in main villages the percentage is 60%. So I wanted to make sure that the minutes recorded that particular point, that there was a variation there. Thank you.
Take them as read. It has been proposed by Councillor Higginson and seconded by David Evans. Could you show of hands of approval, please? I myself wasn't present, so I shan't acknowledge that. And we also had a special planning committee just to deal with one item on the agenda. And do you need me to go page by page, or can you say that those are accurate as read? Thank you. Councillor Evans has proposed as read, seconded this time by Councillor Higginson. Show of hands for approval, please. Thank you all very much. So now we go on to the applications as of today. The first is you. Is it Phil? Oh, it's Craig. Thank you, Craig. And I shall now leave the chamber. Well, that is...
Which one is it, Madam Chair?
Oh, sorry. As we have public speaking, if you're not always clear on the agenda, if there's public speaking, we like to move those up the agenda so that particular people who have an interest in that application can then lead and not have to wait a long time through the agenda. And this is for Devorden, and this is application 01741.
Mr O'Connor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application is for land off Well Lane for the development of 15 houses and associated works. The plan, you can see the location plan on site. The site is located on the south-westerly edge of the main village of Devorden. It's adjacent to the Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty and runs parallel to the eastern boundary, adjacent to the existing allotments, and whilst Well Lane runs along the northern boundary. So the Well Lane at the moment actually forms the edge of the village. The allotments is there in the bottom right-hand corner, Phil. Yeah, that's the allotments there, and the B road which runs along through the village. This plan shows the site. The application site forms part of an allocated site within the local development plan. It's allocated for 60-40 housing allocation for a maximum of 15 dwellings under policy SAH11. Whilst the dwellings that form part of this application lie within the development boundary for Devorden, the proposed new access, open amenity space and a 5-metre wide garden curtilage strip for plots 14 and 15 lie outside of the allocation. So if you'd like to go back, Phil, sorry. Back to the allocation plan, yes, please. So there's a line there which shows the line of the allocation, which is the site boundary, which is the middle line. Phil, if you just, yeah, that's the line of the allocation. The other line, which is the outer line, that shows the application site. So it's outside of the allocation, but that is for the access, the open space, and there's no built form within that area. So you move on to the photographs, Phil. This is a photo along Well Lane. Photograph showing the junction from Well Lane onto the B road. Photo of the allotments. Obviously, members who were on site yesterday were aware of, of the location. Next photograph is the site itself. It's open fields. And again, another picture of the site itself. So this plan shows the proposed development. So the proposed dwellings will provide affordable housing. So it's a mix of 9 affordable units. The mix would be 5 social rented units and 4 low-cost home ownership units, and 6 dwellings for the open market. So the affordable housing units consist of semi-detached dwellings, which are located to the east of the site, and then the 6 private market dwellings are to the west of the site and are accessed off Well Lane. A community orchard is proposed to run along the perimeter of the southern and western boundaries with a green link, and the green infrastructure proposed will also provide screening for the edge of the village and to create a new village boundary. And there's also a path there which would run round, an informal path for recreation. The application has been subject to considerable discussions regarding layout and design, both at pre-application stage and as part of the application process, and with communication with the delegated panel. The application proposes a new access, which is located to the south of the site, which is an improvement in terms of the highway standards on the existing Well Lane. The existing Well Lane would be closed up and would be pedestrianised about 30 metres in, with then a smaller path and landscaping to the top. There'd be bollards at the top there. Phil, if you'd like to go on to the next slide. This shows a plan to show the planting which has been proposed for the site. As you can see, it's quite green. It's been built within green infrastructure principles, and there's also an informal link there for people to access it through the housing development, so it's quite permeable. Again, this plan shows the blocking up of Well Lane. You can see the pedestrianised area and the landscaping at the top. Let's go to the next picture. So we come on to the design of the houses themselves. The houses have been designed to be edge of settlements, so quite rural in appearance, workers' cottages for the affordable housing. They've got good detail in terms of chimneys, overhanging roofs, sills and headers, and have been designed to be appropriate for the rural setting. So again, these are some of the affordable units. It's a mix of brick and render. They've all got sort of the curved doorways and that rural aesthetic for that edge of town development. These are the bigger properties now. So these are the private dwellings. They look very similar in terms of their form and design as the affordable dwellings do. Great. If you'd like to go back to the layout now, Phil. So as I said, the proposed new access involves closing the existing off the B4293 into Well Lane and introducing a new road link some 45 metres south of that. And existing access into the allotments will also be relocated to the south, with informal parking being provided for the allotments, which the allotments don't have any parking at the moment. The eastern end of Well Lane will also be closed up, and it's noted the footpath has been extended down Well Lane, so there'll now be a footpath to the northern part of the site, going all the way along Well Lane for people to use. The plans originally made provision for a footpath link at the top of Well Lane, running parallel to the boundary of Glebe House in order to link to the village green. There is currently no footpath along Well Lane, nor adjacent to Glebe House for the existing residents of Well Lane or connecting the existing allotments to the village, so it's unconnected at the moment. However, following protracted negotiation between the Highway Authority and the developers' transport representatives, together with an assessment of the existing on-site constraints and the scale of development, the section of footpath adjacent to Glebe House has since been omitted, along with the proposed road narrowing, which I'll come on to later. In terms of consultation responses, Councillor Bob Greenland, the local member, has provided comments, which I believe will be read out following this presentation. Devorden Community Council have objected to the development, and their concerns are outlined within the report. The application has been viewed by my green infrastructure colleagues, and they offer no objection in terms of ecology or implications on the landscape. Highways have been consulted on the application, have been a full part of the negotiation process in developing the design to ensure that it's an enhancement and improvement on the current situation. And their comments are outlined in the report, which I will go on to in more detail in a minute. And there's no other objections from any other party in terms of urban design, natural resources, Wales, Welsh Water, or Nirvan Healthbourne haven't actually come back to us on this stage, but there's no other formal objections to the application. In terms of neighbour notification, there are 4 letters of support and 11 letters of objection, and these objections are outlined in the report for members. As I've said, the site is largely located within the development boundary of Devorden and is located in the LDP as a site for residential development for the 60/40 sites to provide much needed affordable housing. And therefore, the principle of this development is deemed to be acceptable. All built form lies within the development boundary of the allocated site, as indicated on the location plan I've shown you. The other elements, the access point and the open space, are included in the application. However, they provide an improved scheme that will benefit the wider local community for the purposes of providing a better development and providing a better form of placemaking. The scale of the application site also has wider benefits to provide green space and to form a more intensive green buffer to soften the appearance of the development in the wider landscape. Paragraph 4.2.25 of PPW 10 confirms that a community's need for affordable housing is a material consideration and must be taken into account when formulating development plan policies, as well as determining relevant planning applications. Whilst only a small development, this application seeks to assist this provision of affordable housing by providing 60% affordable, so that's 9 units. In terms of needs, the Council Housing Officer has confirmed that there are currently 214 households in housing need waiting accommodation in the Devorden area, so this will help to plug that gap and provide that much needed affordable housing. In terms of placemaking and design, the development has been designed to ensure that it is fit for purpose for an edge development setting, and the proposed materials, which is a mix of render, brick, artificial slate for the roof, are all considered to be appropriate for this setting. In terms of design and placemaking, the proposed development is in accordance with policies S17 and DES1 and wouldn't have a harmful impact on the AUMB or the wider landscape. The properties have been orientated as such as that they wouldn't be overbearing or have any impact on the privacy of any of the neighbouring properties, and we don't foresee any issues in terms of impact on any party's residential amenity. Therefore, the development is in accordance with policy EP1 of the local development plan. It is acknowledged the development is unable to prioritise walking, and it is regrettable that the application isn't providing a pedestrian link to the village green and to Devorden village. Philip, if you'd like to go to the page after the garage, please. When this site was allocated within the LDP, within the examination, there was 3 options put forward to create a pedestrian link for this development to the village area. And these options have been outlined on these slides. So this is option 1, which would be widening the pedestrian link, which involves a third party's land. So that is not achievable, and the inspector did actually outline that in his report. So that option wasn't achievable. So that is an option available to us today. The next option is option number 3. Option number 3. This includes narrowing the B road to a one-way strip with give way on each side, and creating a pedestrian link, and also creating a link within the village green. As you can see there, a road is created. The next option, which is option 2, was again narrowing of the road by creating a single carriageway there and connecting up the footbridge onto the link. All of these options have been reviewed as part of this planning application. However, Council's highway officers foresee that these engineering works is over-engineering for the amount of development that is proposed, and the existing pedestrian links in Devorden are substandard. They're not to the existing regulations. Therefore, they come up with a scheme which, working with the applicants, to create better pedestrian links within the site, a new access to the site, and making it facilitate that they can change the surface of the ground, putting some rubble strips, putting some signage to make people aware that there is potential for pedestrians to be using the road link. Phil, if you'd like to go to the next slide, this is what's being proposed. So at the top of Well Lane on the junction, there'll be a landscaped area with pedestrian link to the road, and that is the gap then over the road to the tarmac area, which members were yesterday where we did the presentation on the green. So there's a link. There wouldn't be a direct link, pedestrian link there, but this is what is seen as a compromise in terms of the scale of the development and enhancing the site in general. So Highways consider this to be the most appropriate way, and conditioning that the applicant sign into a section 278 to change the service, to put in some rubble strips potentially, and to put some signage in. They feel this is satisfactory and of a scale that is appropriate for this development. Planning officers, on balance, weighing up the provision of the affordable housing against the sustainable transport and the permeability of the site, feel this is an acceptable compromise, and we are recommending that this is acceptable as outlined within the report. In terms of drainage, the drainage strategy identifies that the pond can provide the storage volumes required for surface water and has been designed as such, and soakaways will be provided together with water butts to individual houses. Welsh Water are satisfied with the proposal for disposal of foul water, unless this element is considered acceptable. I'd also like to note that today we've received a petition outlining a number of addresses, which I haven't been able to clarify the amount of properties that have shown support for the application and is supporting the need for affordable housing in the area. So in conclusion, it's considered the development is acceptable. We appreciate that it is regrettable that pedestrian link hasn't been able to be achieved with the village green, but we think the solution that's been put forward is acceptable and provides the council with much needed affordable housing. We don't feel that the development would have an adverse impact on the rural character and appearance of the wider area or any third parties, and therefore we are recommending that the application is approved, subject to a Section 106 legal agreement requiring and securing the affordable housing, subject to the applicant signing into a Section 278 with the Highways Department, and subject to the conditions that are outlined in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. As you all know, the local member, Bob Greenland, is indisposed at the moment, but he has sent in a message, and Councillor Murphy is now going to read it out. Philip?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll read it verbatim. It's a reasonably long letter, but it is very detailed. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the Planning Committee on Tuesday, but I would like to comment on the application. There can be no doubt of the need for more affordable housing provision throughout the county. The Strategy and Policy Officer has confirmed that within the Devorden area there are 214 households in housing need, far more than can be provided by this 60% affordable development. Good housing should not be a privilege. It should be a right for every British citizen. I do not believe there is a potential housing site left within the county that does not have some disadvantages. So if we are to meet the pressing need, especially for people on lower incomes, we are going to have to consider the merits against the disadvantages of every application that comes before the planning authority. The site is included in the current LDP plan, and so even if this application was unsuccessful, in time another proposal would undoubtedly come forward. I have been part of many public discussions about this site from the time of the original LDP proposals, and there have been many objections put forward against allowing development on the site. In my view, one or two of the points raised have been very compelling and needed satisfactory solutions to make the development acceptable. Devorden Community Council have discussed the development on a number of occasions, and their concerns encapsulate the issues raised by members of the community. So in reaching my own conclusion on the application, I will address their points of objection. A small part of the development is outside the area allocated in the LDP. True, but the additional land enhances the public green amenity offered by the development. I welcome that. It is important that any new development does not exacerbate existing drainage issues. They cannot necessarily be expected to cure existing shortcomings within the area as well. What I was looking for here was confirmation from Welsh Water that the drainage proposals were sustainable. This is met by condition 691. They have also confirmed that foul drainage can be accommodated adequately within the nearby Welsh Water sewage plant by the use of small tankers. Neither would there be an appreciable increase in the number of times vehicles would need to visit the sewage plant. For me, the major issue of this site has been around road safety, traffic and pedestrians. The junction adjacent to the site between Well Lane, the B4293 and the Village Green has very poor visibility for traffic emerging from Well Lane towards Chepstow. The latest proposal in this application to close Well Lane to traffic and use the new road through the development will improve the situation markedly. For pedestrians, the ideal solution would be to provide a footway to modern standards. As the report explains, that is not possible. The use of the top of Well Lane for pedestrians only will help. As suggested, pedestrians could cross the road, accompanied by suitable road markings that warn motorists of the shared space would be an acceptable solution. Highways, who are always cautious in these circumstances, are confident such a scheme can come forward. I would also suggest that an advisory 20-mile-per-hour sign be placed approaching the point on the highway from both directions of the B4293. In addition, I would like to see the 30-mile-an-hour restriction extended for traffic coming from the Chepstow direction, leading to lower speeds around the top of Well Lane. It should also be noted that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples in the UK of safe developments in villages where no pavements can be provided. Condition 14 covers lighting restrictions for ecology reasons. No doubt that will also protect neighbours to an extent. However, it is impossible for any residential development not to include lighting visible from adjoining properties. That is a downside of development. Lighting from this development will be seen from neighbouring properties. I believe it can be controlled to make it acceptable. There is one further point that I would like to raise. Despite the poor access onto Well Lane, it has been used inappropriately by heavy vehicles, sometimes becoming stuck further along the lane. The improved access through the development onto Well Lane might further entice heavy vehicles, especially using sat-nav, to use it as a shortcut. I would like to see warning signs, including those for sat-nav users at the entrance to the development and at the lower end of Well Lane. In conclusion, I feel that following the lengthy negotiations with planning officers, what has emerged is a development that meets the exacting standards required, and I support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. The next person to speak is Councillor Williams of Devorden Community Council, please. Yeah. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Williams.
I think Councillor Greenland's statement did a very good job of summarising Devorden Community Council's position, so I won't go through all of those points. We stand opposed to the development in its current form. I want to draw your attention just to 2 of those objections in particular. I want to read from the statement that you have in front of you from planning officers. Highways say, "It is unfortunate that the site is unable to comply with the sustainable transport hierarchy as specified in Planning Policy Wales Edition 10, nor can footways be provided in accordance with the Design Guidance for Active Travel." We don't think it's unfortunate, we think it's inexcusable. We don't think that in the 21st century we should be building developments where a part of the community is effectively orphaned from the rest of the community by a major road. If you look at the plan as it stands, there is zero provision for any safe access for pedestrians or cyclists. It's left to a private discussion between Highways and the developer before we will know which measures can or can't be taken, and at that point, of course, the community is excluded from the discussion. I think we're faced with a very real possibility of young families strapping children into the back of cars to drive the 40 metres to the excellent playground at Devorden Hood Hall for fear of having their children knocked over on that road. And I don't think, and we don't think, that the development or the plan should go forward with that, without provisions being made and discussed. So on that ground alone, we recommend that it is not accepted in its current form. And I think talking of unfortunate, I think the second thing is the waste treatment plant in Devorden. So some years ago, it's a plant that's intended to actually digest effluent and release clean water back into the ecosystem. Residents know that it's not working as it should do. Some years ago, no doubt a sensible compromise was made where tankers come in and take away the excess effluent. But you can't get away from the fact that the plant is currently therefore at capacity. These 15 homes will put it over capacity. The solution from Welsh Water is to basically schedule more tankers So that puts us in the invidious position of Devorden exporting excrement to the rest of the county. They say that they're going to be using small tankers. I'm often held up by these tankers. They're large vehicles. If one drove through that door there, the cab would be probably where I am, and the rear axle would probably be where the door is. These are large vehicles. We think there may be as many as 3 extra tankers in a month. And of course, the access to the waste treatment plant now is directly through the new development. And so the homes, the people that live in those homes will have those tankers driving past their front doors many times a week, potentially. So we think that it's not beyond the bounds of this proposal to be able to create a more sustainable sewage solution. And we don't think that it should go forward in, the plan should go forward in its current form unless such a solution can be found. I just wanted to add that obviously Monmouthshire is very proud of its clean green heritage. There's a lot of effort going into recycling and so on, and it seems to me very contradictory that the compromise that you're potentially considering for the Devorden sewage treatment plant involves adding road miles and everything else to the simple job of treating sewage. And my last point, because I have a few seconds left, on the surface drainage water, I think we accept that a SEDS compliant proposal has been put forward. But many times Welsh Water have said that they do not want surface runoff connected to their sewage system. In the current proposal, Welsh Water are the level 4 SEDS option. In other words, if the systems on site are overwhelmed, the runoff goes to the sewage treatment plant at the rate of 5 litres per second. They've consistently said that they don't want that to happen, and I'd like to have it confirmed officially that they know they are in fact the drainage supplier of last resort. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Is Mr. Howard Williams in the room? If you'd like to come and address us, please. Mr. Williams, you also have 4 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm here to represent the views of the residents of Well Lane to object to the proposed development. You all should be in possession of the report prepared by Joanne White and also a letter from Humphrey Solicitors detailing all the MCC and Welsh Government policies that are being contravened by this plan. There are also significant responses from both NRW and Welsh Water outlining major concerns. The site has been rejected by Monmouthshire County Council 3 times in the past, a view substantiated by the Planning Inspectorate on appeal. The site was one of 5 considered at the LTP stage. It was deemed unsuitable by MCC Highways on the grounds that no adequate footpath could be provided, and also the White Report considered it unsuitable from an aesthetic point of view. In fact, on the traffic light system set up by the council, it had more red lights than any of the other sites. Despite this, the planning department still favoured this site above alternatives that had no traffic problems and were less visually intrusive. The planning inspector approved the site under the impression that the site was feasible in traffic and pedestrian access terms, something that the MCC Council now concedes is not the case. While the LDP has been adopted, it is not infallible. 2 of the original 4 sites in the village having already been resubmitted for development. One of these sites was originally identified as the preferred site for inclusion in the current NDP, establishing at least one other clear alternative to the Well Lane site. The current plan bears little resemblance to the plan presented for approval. The plan exceeds the approved area and its design differs significantly from the approved site. Therefore, we say it should be not rely on LDP approval, but be judged as a new site. There will be significant visual impact. Well Lane is a natural boundary to the village. The plans include a new road junction, the removal of 200 plus metres of hedgerow, and the installation around the site of close-boarded timber fencing. This will totally change the character of the site from rural to urban. NRW have put forward a range of objections and conclude with the phrase that the site should only go ahead if it can be demonstrated that the development cannot reasonably be located elsewhere, but we know other sites are available. The Pure Ecology report states that the field had been sprayed with herbicide, showing that the current site is being managed to minimise biodiversity. Dwyr Cymru have concerns with stormwater which are not adequately covered. The proposed development will take the local sewage plant capacity very close to its limit. As a result, it might not be possible to develop houses in future in the site. So it's essential, therefore, that the wrong choice is not made at this stage. Well Lane is a through road with regular agricultural and heavy traffic, including Welsh water waste tankers, which would now be travelling through a housing estate with associated danger. 7 houses will share 2 exits directly onto Well Lane, below the main exit at the narrow point of the lane. In the document you have in front of you, it states a footway along the B4293 that satisfies current design standards cannot be provided, and the Highway Authority consider it inappropriate to provide a substantial footway and associated engineering works for only an additional 15 dwellings. It also says the proposed development is unable to provide a clear pedestrian link and is unable to actively promote pedestrian links to the village. It states that drivers should be aware that pedestrians may be using the road at their own risk, and that's council words, not ours. A new development of 15 houses will result in major increases in the number of pedestrians using the link, many of whom will be children going to school buses or on local play areas. From a common sense point of view, surely it cannot be right to build a complex of houses which effectively isolates the residents from the safe passage to the local amenities. We urge the Council to uphold their own policies and refuse this application. If permitted, this application would cause unacceptable harm to the character, appearance, amenities and environment of the local area, and fails to provide safe and convenient pedestrian access from the site to the village, in clear contravention of local and national planning policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We now have Mr. Stephen Harris, the agent, please. You're also allowed 4 minutes, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Stefan Harris. I work for LRM Planning. We're the consultants acting on behalf of the developer in this instance. I appreciate the development of this site has generated local objection, going back to its allocation in the LDP and even prior to that. However, on balance, this proposal is considered to be one that Council is clearly able to support. The site is a housing allocation within the LDP. Whilst this does not give the green light in and of itself, it makes it clear that, subject to material considerations, proposals for the designated use should be supported. Therefore, the principle of development of the site for residential use is firmly established. It has been mentioned in objection comments that the site has been subject to refusals for residential development in the past. It should be made clear that those were in 2002 and 2004, prior to the current LDP, which was obviously adopted in 2014. At that stage, an independent inspector decided to allocate the site for housing based on sound and balanced judgment. There have been a number of highways-based objections to this proposal. In this regard, we've offered various options for the access route into the village, including the version that the LDP inspector favoured. The eventual solution that we have reached was in conjunction with highways officers, in conjunction with their advice, and therefore has their support. We did offer various options, but we were led down the route of the one that would be preferable to the local authority. This solution was preferred as it does not rely upon the use of third-party land. The Highways comments conclude that for only 15 units, it would be unreasonable to require more onerous measures than those currently proposed. In any case, our proposals include a safer route into the village via a new pedestrianised area at the head of Well Lane on a route that already serves existing properties. In addition, vehicle tracking has been undertaken that demonstrates the new route through the site and onto Well Lane is usable by vehicles measuring up to 16.5 metres in length. In terms of the foul sewage treatment work, Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water has also commented the proposed development will not result in a substantial increase in the number of visits to the treatment plant, as set out in paragraph 5.1.11 of the committee report. There are limited opportunities to provide new social housing in the rural towns and villages of Monmouthshire, which is why allocations such as this are included within the LDP. As members will note, and has already been said today, at paragraph 6.10.2 of the report, there are 214 households in a housing need, waiting for accommodation within the Devorden area. The need for social housing is a material planning consideration, and one that I appreciate this committee takes very seriously. The site layout and house types have been designed via an iterative process of engagement with the planning department. We're therefore pleased to offer a high-quality design solution that has the support of officers. Through the allocation of the site within the LDP, there was inevitably going to be impact upon existing hedgerow, but the mitigation proposed has been supported by the council's ecologist. The proposed communal orchard and meadow will enhance the area through providing public access to a previously private field parcel. To conclude, it's clear that this development is contentious, but we hope that members will acknowledge that in reaching this proposal, we submitted a thoroughly considered planning application. It's considered that the conclusion of the officer's report is a balanced assessment that has been reached after months of careful consideration. We therefore respectfully encourage members to follow their officer's recommendation and grant approval for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Right, we were all on site yesterday, most of us anyway. Would anybody like to comment on this? Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yes, I agree. I'm going to stand back from that. We've got the problems today, haven't we? Yeah, I looked long and hard at this when I was on site with everybody yesterday. And can clearly see what the reservations are. I've read the report and reread the report, and I don't think we're ever going to have a situation where we've got an ideal site. We're running out in this county of ideal sites. What is important to do is to make sure that where we have got a site with reservations, that we've tried as hard as we possibly can to make sure that any problems associated with the site are mitigated. I've come to the conclusion that they have been, so along with the local member, I'll be supporting the application.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have to remember this site is allocated in the LDP, and there should be, as far as I'm concerned, no part of the county that shouldn't pull its weight towards delivering the vast shortages of affordable housing that we have in the county. And therefore, I welcome this 60-40 allocation. What else it does is to, if you like, broaden the it will broaden the character of the village, simply by allowing people that couldn't possibly afford to get anywhere near the place to come and increase the diversity there. So we've always got dilemmas that's already been mentioned. Should we do this? Should we not do this? We just need housing, and that's a fact of life. As I say, the site is allocated in the LDP. I've looked carefully through the paperwork before me, and I'm encouraged to hear what the local member has said, and I'm happy to second what Councillor Murphy has just proposed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howard, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't have an issue with the development as a whole, apart from one aspect of it, and I think you probably guessed what that is from the site visit yesterday. And unlike the Councillor Harris, I don't believe in affordable housing at any cost where there's a risk to basically to human life. I also looked carefully at the report last night. I looked at PPW again, the active travel bill. I looked at TAN 18. I looked through the LDP. I looked at the inspector's report because it gave me a lot of food for thought as well. And I note from PPW, the current edition, number of references here that it's the key role of the planning system to support sustainable transport by facilitating developments which are sited in the right locations where they can be easily accessed by sustainable modes of travel without the need for a car, that make it possible for all short journeys within and beyond the development to be easily made by walking and cycling. Para 4.111, Welsh Government requires the use of sustainable transport hierarchy which prioritises walking, cycling and public transport. And then paragraph 4.1.16, which is referenced in the officer's report on page 44, although that's only part quoted, because it seems to suggest that in rural areas you can consider the sustainable transport hierarchy a little bit differently. But in fact, if you read the whole paragraph that isn't referred to in the report, it doesn't say that at all. It says that local authorities could apply the transport hierarchy by first considering how the location and design of new development could encourage walking and cycling to shops and services, etc. I then looked at TAN 18. Needless to say, it replicates much of what's in PPW, or PPW replicates TAN 18 as it came after it. Paragraph 6.2, in determining planning applications, authorities should ensure new development encourages walking as a prime means for local journeys. Pedestrian routes provide a safe and fully inclusive pedestrian environment, particularly for routes to primary schools, etc. I then looked at the LDP policies S16, where development proposals should propose sustainable, safe forms of transport which reduce the need to travel, increase provision for walking and cycling. I then looked at MV2, development of sites shall depend on their location, size and local need, include provision for and integration of appropriate sustainable transport links, including walking and cycling. Policy MV2, DS1A, ensure a safe, secure, pleasant, convenient environment, accessible, encourages walking and cycling. And the development, as I think Councillor Williams for the Community Council suggested, doesn't come anywhere near addressing any of the aims of the Active Travel Bill. So, to my mind, there's a clear conflict with national policy, and I think the development would be ripe for a call-in. So I think the pedestrian access is fundamentally dangerous. I think it's totally inappropriate to encourage pedestrians as a sole walking route to the village to enter a busy classified road and into conflict with traffic. A further valid point is that we're told that low-cost housing residents have lower levels of car ownership and will rely more on public transport, where the bus stop and the school bus stop is on the opposite side of the village green. And I think no parents in their right mind would allow children to walk unaccompanied there, and the walking route comes out on a blind bend, as we saw on the site visit yesterday. And I remind members, it was only a few years ago that a schoolboy was killed on this road, albeit on the other side of the village, but that does highlight the nature of the traffic here. I looked at the inspector's report, and in particular the wording, and I think it's been interpreted incorrectly in the Officer's report, in that it suggests that the inspector came to the view that walking access to the site could be dealt with. I don't think it suggests that at all. My interpretation is that the inspector allowed the site to form part of the LDP on the basis that a pedestrian route seemed feasible by the normal means, as it did indeed to us with one of the plans that suggested a footway could be provided, and on site it turned out it couldn't be because there weren't the tolerances in the road width. I'd also, it's helpful that Roger's here, because I remind him of a development that happened in my former ward in Gilwern, obviously a Brecon Beacons National Park application, where there's no walking route to the village. And what's happened, or the people who moved in were extremely annoyed about it, and the outcome was that Roger put in an application on behalf of the County Council to provide a walking route to the village on county land. So you can see these problems don't go away. I think then, if committee is minded to approve the application, I would at the very least ask for a deferment. And again, the Speaker from the Community Council referred to not having any input on potential solutions. And condition 18 has been suggested in terms of a safety audit and providing details of a scheme for the pedestrian access. I think as a bare minimum that the application ought to be deferred, and that scheme, that work ought to be done up front. As I say, the key thing for me, the fundamental thing is whether or not the scheme can be safely provided. We don't know that, and to give consent and then condition it where it may not be possible to provide access, I don't think is the right way around. So I would move refusal in the clear conflict with national and local policy. I would ask members, if they are minded to approve it, that they seek to defer it to get that upfront work on the access. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Very quiet. Yep, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I completely understand the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Howard, and quotation of paragraph 4.1.16 of Planning Policy Wales, edition 10. And what it says there, in terms of, I appreciate what's being said, but it does say that in rural villages and in those locations, and I think this is a sensible approach to take, is that they aren't all designed to be fully accessible for pedestrians, and there's plenty of villages and settlements across Monmouthshire which I can think of with B roads running through them which haven't got those pedestrian links, and there are different circumstances for different developments, and I agree there's frustrating that we can't present the planning committee today with a scheme which does allow for a pedestrian link. However, we do feel that with the applicant signing up to the section 278, with the enhancements that are being proposed and the mitigation that could be put in place on the site, and given the scale of the gap we're talking about, that it is acceptable. And I think there is a recognition within Planning Policy Wales that in rural villages that there are local circumstances which prohibit fully engineered solutions, which also obviously affect the character and appearance of the area as well. So I do appreciate what Councillor Howard is saying, and as officers we are frustrated that we're not able to provide a scheme that does have that direct pedestrian link. However, what has been proposed, we feel after protracted negotiations and discussions with the applicants, is acceptable on balance, and it does provide the much needed affordable housing which I know this council wants to produce and wants to provide for residents of Monmouthshire. Just to answer a couple of the other questions in relation to drainage, I mean, it's already mentioned by the applicant, but Welsh Water have come back to us and said that they have no objection to the proposed drainage, and the amount of tankers, if there are any additional tankers in the area, wouldn't be deemed to be unacceptable in terms of the amount of traffic movements they would create. I was also mentioned about calling. This application wouldn't need to be notified to the Welsh Government in terms of calling because of it's allocated within the LDP, so it wouldn't be subject to that calling. I think that's answered the queries.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, well, the issue of the call-in, my interpretation is if there's you can demonstrate a conflict with national policy, that's grounds for calling to be considered. But that aside, I thank Craig for his answer, and I appreciate the amount of work and negotiation that's gone into the scheme. However, based on our policy position and the national policy position, and in the absence of a scheme that's been assessed for its safety, I couldn't honestly put my hand up for this, because if it was developed and something happened to a child, I don't think I could live with the guilt. So I shall have to move a refusal, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you.
Just hold on a sec. Can you just hold on 1 second? Councillor.
It was only to say, in terms of, again, as Councillor Howard, I understand the concerns with regards to safety. It's just to note condition number 18 of the report. It does outline that no development shall commence until detailed design, safety orders and technical approval for the relocation of Well Lane Junction and associated works on the B42393 have been submitted and approved by the local planning authorities. So your highway officers and colleagues will look at that in terms of safety and obviously put the best mitigation in place for residents.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, obviously this scheme makes a significant contribution to affordable housing, which is one of the bonuses of the scheme. But I would like a bit more detail on the highways side, because I think the ward councillor mentioned about the speed limit and so forth. So if we're going to have a situation where there isn't a complete pedestrian link, then I want to know a little bit more detail to be fleshed out as to exactly how the speed through there is going to be controlled to make sure it's safe for the pedestrians. I mean, I think the ward councillor mentioned about a 20 mile per hour zone, and I appreciate that you can say all of these details can be worked out in a highways agreement, but I think I'd like a little bit more detail exactly how the traffic going through there is going to be calmed without a proper pedestrian link to ensure the safety of the people who live there, and also children who are walking to the bus stop, etc. And I don't think that's being covered. The other thing, looking at the plan, how the road layout is, and I'm looking at the ones where the black, if you could move the slides. If you go back, not that one, the one before. yeah, if you look at that, if you sort of increase that, one of my concerns is at the bottom there's two entrances to properties there that are furthest away from the main road. Now, they join a single track road, and I don't understand why this new access couldn't have been developed so it basically went through the whole of the site, so there wouldn't have to be these two little accesses on a narrow lane, and that to me would have been a better rearrangement of that site to ensure that there wasn't a conflict with vehicles across the residents that are already there across that. The other point I want to make is that I noticed on the condition there doesn't seem to be anything about the quality of the materials that are used, and I think we need to have a condition on that to make sure that I think I was told it was going to be a smooth render or whatever the surface is going to be, but obviously in terms of the look of properties, it is important that we actually have a condition to specify, perhaps in association with the designated panel, to make sure that we're happy with the materials that are being used. And you may reassure me that that's going to happen anyway, but there's no condition I can find on that, so I certainly want that down. So if you could answer those particular highway points, and also the issue about the quality of materials as well. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Collar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation to the highway matters, we'll receive the amended plans from the developer, but we'd anticipate those minimising, introducing footways such that it minimises the amount of time that a pedestrian would be within the carriageway, and that there would then be further features in terms of signage and road features, be they rumble strips and markings, to highlight awareness of the fact that there will be pedestrians, or there's a risk of pedestrians being within the actual carriageway. So we believe we have to review the detailed design that comes through, but it's the mixture of those features, minimising the amount of time which a pedestrian is required to be in the carriageway, and increasing signage to and from both sides, which will help us to mitigate the risks of the scheme.
In terms of the query on materials, yes, if I can draw your attention to condition number 7, Councillor, it is there in terms of proposed materials. We certainly will be looking at those and checking, making sure that it's appropriate for the edge of village settlement.
So it's already in. Yeah, could I come back, Chair, on the highways thing? Because obviously there was 2 points that were raised about how the site is laid out, because I would have thought if you put a road you've actually added an extra road, and you could have avoided these two little junctions into a single track road if you'd actually put one road all the way through, and rather than the way it's been done. And I didn't get an answer to that question, and I'm not happy about the answer that I've had from highways, because there's no commitment there to reduce the speed limit when you've got pedestrians and children walking in the road. Thank you.
In relation to speed limits, it's already within a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, but we will improve the signage to highlight further the shared space element of the scheme, but that will be minimised as far as possible. In relation to the design coming off the single lane, I don't know if Craig's got any comments.
Yeah, with regards to the layout, we've been through many different variations of the layout, and obviously, if you were to keep one lane open, I think it was what Councillor Brown is saying, there'd be 2 points of conflict onto the B road. So we're trying to reduce that as much as possible. So that's why the existing infrastructure, which is outlined on Well Lane, is being utilised, and there's just an additional bit of road there, which is enhancement on the existing access point. So that's why there's only 1 point of conflict then onto the B road and the way it's been laid out. There have been several different designs, and this is the one that has come forward. And obviously, in terms of road movements. A sweep has been done of that site for agricultural vehicles and for traffic. So in terms of the layout, we do feel it's acceptable and it's appropriate for that type of development. You've got the denser scheme towards the east of the site, and then it's less dense out to the west as well. So that was seen to be appropriate for that type of road layout.
Yeah, I don't think you quite get what I'm talking about. I mean, if you have basically, if you have a road through the middle and then you have houses coming off it, then that access, that extra access would have served all the properties, so you wouldn't have needed the two little accesses at the top. That's really, in terms of the layout, what I was talking about. But I'm afraid I'm going to support the idea of either of deferment, I think, in relation to the highways issue, because I don't think it's satisfactory not to have any commitment about the speed limit being reduced. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate the concerns with regard to the footpath, etc., because, you know, when we were there yesterday, you can see what the issue is. But having said that, there are lots of villages who have exactly the same issues as this. And having spent a lifetime in health and safety and assessing risks, there are occasions where you cannot eliminate the risk. And therefore, what the law says, you must do everything you can to reduce that risk. And I am confident that our highways and the planning people have looked at this in detail, and everything that can do to mitigate what is a potential hazard there will be done. And I have, listening to what the local member has said, and it was, you know, very well put over. There are issues, but I think the benefits outweigh those issues, and those issues can be dealt with satisfactorily. And in that case, I will be going for this application and supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Chair. I have no objections to the development as such, or the design, although it's not inspirational, it doesn't offend. But I share Councillor Howard's concerns, which he made so eloquently just now. Well, villages, and I want to come back to the point made by the officer, that there are lots of villages where the sort of circumstances prevail. And that is right. That is right. There are. But those circumstances were created probably before the legislation that we have now. And if we were looking at those houses now, they wouldn't get passed because they wouldn't get past the legislation. So that, I don't think, is a valid point. What we are concerned with is the situation we have with this site and the legislation that we have now. When we were coming out yesterday, some of us had the privilege of watching a gentleman who lived there negotiating his way out with his own car. And when you had a look at the room the car took up, and it wasn't a big car, it gave you an idea of what the issues were on this location. So I'm aware, and I remember well, the child being killed in the village, and I, with giving it every effort I can to pass, I cannot support this where there is an issue over the traffic movements on this site. I would hate to think that I was party to an accident. God, that would be terrible. So I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Becker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's all about highways, really, isn't it? I think I was looking at the... Is it?
No, it's me.
Oh, he's still on there. David? Yeah, I think, you know, with the sewage question, that seems to be answered by Welsh Water, they seem to be quite happy with that. Some of the other aspects to do with the design don't necessarily bother me. It is all about the highways issue. I used to cycle this road. It can be pretty hairy up on that junction. But that said, I was never hit at that junction. So, you can mitigate the risk. I don't like the plan. I don't think it plugs into the village properly. But do I think that is grounds to refuse the permission when we have to look at it on its own merits? I'm not sure as there's enough for me to hang my hat on to say we can't allow it because of that. And I have to have faith in our highways team that they will put in the appropriate mitigation for the risk. So I do completely understand the concerns about that area, but we have rules in place to mitigate that risk, so I will be supporting it, I think.
Thank you very much. Councillor, Councillor, carry on.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered, the allotments have been there for years and years, but I don't know how many were there and how much walking traffic there's been over the years to the allotments, because they've had the same difficulty. Coming back to the junction, as Councillor Dovey said yesterday when that car came out, that won't be there, will it? So that they'll be coming out at this new junction. They won't use that other entrance at all, will they, by the corner? So that's going to be blocked off. So that's going to help a bit, isn't it? Because they'll be coming out here on where there's much better vision up the road and back. And there won't be traffic coming out bang on the corner. I think when I saw the plan where they might make it single line traffic and you could have not those things you have to try and get through when you're in London and you have to drive your car through. No, that's right. I think that would help to slow the traffic down. But I mean, it is 30 mile an hour. I'm not sure how far this way the sign is. It's quite a way back. It's, whether that would need to be put a bit further away from the village. It's at the bottom there somewhere. Yeah, oh, there. Yeah, I would think it'd be a good idea to have it a little bit further back. But if that could be looked at to put the signage back, and we do go for that narrowing of the road, with the vehicles only using this entrance, I think possibly that might help to mitigate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Mark?
Yeah, Chair, only really quickly just to clarify, I might have misunderstood what Councillor Powell was saying, but just so members are clear, we're not proposing any chicanes to narrow the width of the road. That was something that was looked at and discounted, so that wouldn't be proposed as part of this.
Just to clarify that there will remain two lanes of traffic. Our intention is to manage the speed of those 2 lanes of traffic within there, rather than introduce a priority scheme, which may seem inappropriate in at that junction.
Okay, you've all spent all afternoon talking about highways. I've got a detail problem. Can we have the elevations up, please? Yeah. We have the same problem as we have on all our estates. We have heads over the windows at the front, we have no heads over the windows at the rear. These houses will be able to be viewed all the way around, and if we're mindful to pass it this afternoon, can we get that changed, please? Great. Right, we've I can't go on then, but quickly, because we're now an hour and 10 minutes.
Just very quick. I mean, I can't see why, as it's been a recommendation by the ward councillor to reduce the speed limit to 20, and it's not a major request. I can't understand why, from a highway safety point of view, that won't be allowed, and that we can actually confirm that, because that would make me much happier with this scheme than otherwise. I'll probably vote against this if that isn't confirmed, but I think a safety point of view is important here because of the lack of ability to walk properly to the centre of the village. Thank you.
Roger, can we do that?
the actual mandatory traffic speeds will be considered as part of the safety audit. As you say, there's a 30 mile an hour there already. The local member suggested an advisory 20 mile an hour, and if that forms part of the scheme, then that could be considered as well. But as I say, we would intend to use signage and features within the highway to manage the speed in any event.
Okay. Do you want to, we had an amendment placed by you, Councillor Howard. Do you want to test that first? Okay. Councillor Howard proposed that we didn't pass it until we saw all the highway details. Is that seconded? Okay. For those who wish to take that line, please show. 2, and those against, 3, sorry. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, so that's lost. So we go now to the principal. Councillor Murphy, I think you, for the local member, proposed it was accepted. Yeah. Is that seconded? Councillor Harris. Those in favour of the application, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against, please show. 1, 2, 3. Okay, the application is passed.
Right, thank you all very much. You've got me back now, and I'm sure Peter steered the ship very well, even if it was rather a long time. We go to the next application now on page 75, and this is 01801, and this is at Undy.
Okay,
Doing
thank you,
that,
Chair.
Phil? Right,
Thank you.
thanks, Phil.
Yep. So this full application for a detached two-storey dwelling in the rear garden of 12 Elm Avenue was presented to members of committee in January with a recommendation to approve, but it was deferred to a future meeting to allow officers to liaise with the applicant with a view to reducing the proposed property's scale and height and to address issues of the overlooking of Carrig Goch and dwellings at numbers 11, 12 Elm Avenue and any overbearing impact also on those properties. So following negotiations with officers, the applicant has submitted amended plans and all interested parties have been reconsulted. In response to that, we've had late representations which I draw your attention to from Maker Undy Community Council, who continue to be opposed to the application, and this was similar grounds to those that were reported last time in January's late correspondence. They oppose it in terms of overdevelopment of the area. Neighbouring properties will be overlooked. It's currently used as a safe route to school, the road outside. There's drainage and low water pressure issues in the area. It would potentially create a thoroughfare from Elm Avenue to Tump Lane. And I appreciate that was clarified last time that that wouldn't be opened up. Again, they say overdevelopment of the area and it would set a precedent for future applications. And could I also clarify, I think in the report it says there's been 3 objections from separate households. There's actually 5. I think the report was prepared before all of those came in. So, but the grounds of objection are clearly set out in the report. So if I just run through the photos, that's the site up on the left. If you remember, we visited the site a few months ago. That's the garage that's in the garden there that's to be demolished. And you've got a property at the back there, more modern property on Tump Lane itself. And then that's where the top of the site of Elm Avenue is closed off to Tump Lane, which is unsurfaced largely or poorly surfaced and goes up to various ad hoc properties along Tump Lane. And the garage to be demolished is on the left. So that's the site in context. It's the rear garden of number 12. It's quite a large area, as you can see, compared to some of the other properties in the area, or a similar size, rather. That's the survey. There's the garage up in the top corner. And that's the original proposal, which you can see was closer to the road with a garage attached to it. That's been superseded. And that's the previous proposal. Again, it was sitting up really where the slab of the garage is now, with a garage, attached garage lower down, again superseded and replaced following members' concerns. So the new scheme has been set back from Elm Avenue, so there's more relief between it and Carrig Gork, which is opposite. It's property up here. The garage, and going back, the garage has been removed now. That shows where the garage was originally going to be, but that's been removed. And parking will be now parking by way of a driveway at the front, with additional parking for the existing property as well alongside that. That's the revised design. You can see it's set lower down now. It's not so elevated. The garage has been removed. It's smaller. I think it says there it's 7.2 or 3 metres there. We've actually re-looked at that, and it's lower again than that. It's about 6.7, 6.8 metres high, which helps address the concerns of members regarding it being elevated and overbearing. And the top left-hand window on the front elevation is to be obscure glazed to address concerns from the neighbour opposite. And that's a larger elevational view there. So the glazing there is to be completely obscure glazed, because it would look towards the side patio window of the side elevation of Carrig Gork opposite. And that's a section through the site showing the existing garage in red and the ground level, which would be reduced to lower the floor slab to get the house in, so it's less overbearing. So I've gone through really the changes. The house is appreciably lower. So overall, the reduction in height would be around 1.4 metres compared to the original proposal. Obviously, the double garage is gone. The property's been moved back. The obscure glazed window in the front elevation, with a small window then replacing it in the side, which is there, which again is small and a secondary sort of window, so shouldn't cause an issue of overlooking. And it would be a 3-bedroom dwelling instead of 4, which was the original proposal. So regarding the reduction in scale and mass, we feel now that it's actually acceptable and accords with policies DES1 and EP1 of the LDP. It's appreciably further away from Carrig Gork now. Having had a look at that, we've assessed now that it's 17.9 metres front elevation to the side elevation of Carrig Gork. So we feel in this instance, where there's a public road in between, that relationship is now acceptable. It is nearer, pushed back slightly towards number 11 Elm Avenue, but there's still a good distance between the rear elevation of the proposed dwelling and the side boundary of number 11. There's a minimum of 11 metres and a maximum of around 14 metres difference, so that would be acceptable to avoid unacceptable significant overlooking. So having regard to that, there's also adequate parking provided, which will take vehicles off the road for the existing property, as well as providing off-street parking for the proposed dwelling. So taking all these into consideration, we would recommend approval subject to the Section 106 to provide an affordable housing contribution. There's a need to actually condition that the hedgerow to the side and rear elevation is retained. That isn't in the report, so that will need to be added, as well as the condition mentioned in late correspondence regarding, in the revised report, to ensure that obscure glazing in the front elevation is retained in perpetuity and can't be taken out later and replaced by a future householder. So we'd recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. I believe we have 2 speakers on this application. Mr. Nepen is the first one. Is that you? Please state your name and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is James Nepean. I live in Carreg Goch, the property directly opposite the proposed development. The main problem we had with the initial proposal that we would be overlooked and would suffer a huge loss of privacy. Unfortunately, the revised plans have not addressed our initial concerns and objections. Located at a noticeably elevated plot of land, the 2 upper floor bedroom windows of the development will look into the main living room area of our home through our double patio doors and will overlook our main garden. We will lose all privacy in our main living room and our garden. This is unacceptable. To address the issue of privacy and overlooking, the application proposes that the bedroom window closest to our property is to be fitted with obscured glass. Not only will this look very odd, I find this to be a token gesture, an absurd attempt to address us losing privacy and being overlooked. This unusual feature is to be conditioned with a perpetuity clause. Would this extend to the occupants of the property not being allowed to open their bedroom window so they can't see what we're doing in our living room and garden? Obviously not. That would just be ridiculous. Proposing to obscure the glass of one of the bedroom windows admits there is a problem with privacy and overlooking, but is an inappropriate way to address these issues. The view from our main living room through the large double patio doors will be of a wide, tall and imposing structure facing towards us, with windows positioned close enough to be able to see what we're watching on television and what we're eating when we're sat at the dining table. 15 metres away from us is not an acceptable distance for a 2-storey house to be built. Please see point 573 of the committee report, which states it's actually 15 metres away from us. Tump Lane is characterised by having a spacious, peaceful and private feel to it. This application will take away those features. This application has received objections from 5 neighbouring properties closest to the development, and the Mager and Undy Community Council also recommends again that this application be declined. All objections have been ignored and seems to be biased towards the application going ahead. In summary, the revised plans offer very little alterations for me and my family to feel the applicant has addressed the issues that we initially objected to, and it still does not comply with policy DS1 in relation to privacy and amenity of neighbouring properties. I feel that the solutions to these issues are sadly very weak and half-hearted. I ask the Planning Committee to reject this proposal on these grounds. There are hundreds of houses being built in the area, and a need for more houses is not a legitimate reason for approving this back garden development. There is simply no need for it. Saying that, if there truly is a need for a house on this plot of land, perhaps a dormer bungalow with Velux windows in the roof would have been a more appropriate proposal, as this would have not have invaded our privacy and been overlooked us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we have the agent. Please state your name and you also have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Liddell, agent, architect and planning consultant. This application was considered at the January meeting of this committee. It was recommended for approval by the planning officer. The committee resolved to defer consideration to allow the applicant to consider reducing the scale and height of the dwelling and to address issues of overbearing and overlooking of Carreg Goch and dwellings at 1011 Elm Avenue. The size, scale and height of the dwelling has been reduced. It is now a 3-bedroom house, not 4, and the garage has been removed. It has been moved further away from Carreg Goch and reduced in height by 1.4 metres. It has the design appearance of a cottage, including sloping ceilings to the first floor. The house now occupies 16.3% of the site area. The distance to Carreg Goch has been increased from 13 to 15 metres to 17.9 metres, almost 18 metres. The owner of Carreg Goch, however, expressed concern that the position of his house was not shown accurately on the site plan. A meeting was requested on site with the planning officer. I attended the meeting to discuss only the accuracy of the site plan. We measured the distance from the corners of the dwelling to the fence and found these distances to be an accurate reflection of the site plan. Mr. Napier, however, considered that the house location could be further to the north and the dimensions measured would still apply and that the plan could still be wrong. In an attempt to be helpful, we determined to check the accuracy of the site plan and instructed the specialist professional topographical survey company to return to site to remeasure Carrigorch. The front of the garage on the application site, the corner of 12 Elm Avenue, the dwelling to the other side of Tump Lane and Tump Lane itself in front of Gorch were all measures. These measurements were superimposed on the survey plan and the plan was found to be accurate. Privacy is normally achieved by distance. Mention has been made of an informal rule of 10 metres garden distance, giving a distance between dwellings of 20 metres. However, this has often been reduced. For example, on the new estate on the former MOD land in Caerwent, distances between habitable windows in dwellings on Ash Tree Road and Kilpale Close were measured at just under and just over 12 metres. In this instance, the original distance from the bedroom window to Carrigorch's large window has been increased from about 13 metres on the original application to 17.9 on the present application. In addition, the applicant has agreed to the glazing of the window to be obscure glass, and a planning condition confirms this to be in perpetuity. The garden length of Carrigorch itself varies from 7.5 to 9 metres, not 10 metres. The distance now from the house window to the fence of Carrigorch is 10.2 metres. The distance to the hedge comprising the rear boundary of the proposed dwelling with Elm Avenue varies from 11 to 14 metres. The distance between the proposed dwelling windows to the windows of 11 Elm Avenue is 20 metres and above. Distances to windows to 12 Elm Avenue are greater and all are at very oblique angles. All of the above complies with current planning requirements. In conclusion, can I say that I hope that if we've been able to satisfy all of the committee's concerns and have gone the extra mile in attempting to allay the fears of adjoining residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Liddell. Right, the local member isn't here to speak and also isn't a member of the committee. So I'm sure most of the committee members are aware of the actual site that we went to see. Was it January, I believe, that we went? So, right, I'll open to your comments. Councillor Becker first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's nice to see an actual revised scheme that is genuinely revised. Could we get some guidance on exactly what is the minimum distance between overlooked windows? And also, is there a height difference between the two sites? So are the overlooking windows raised by,
Yeah, there is a height difference, to answer the second part of your question. Yeah, this site is slightly more elevated than Carrigorch, if I can show you the photographs. The site, so there's the garage over to the left-hand side, which has been replaced. They are reducing the site by 200 mils, so the new house, and obviously the new house will be set back into the site. You see the land falls down to Tump Lane, and this is the side fence of Carrigorch, and the house is the other side, so there's a gradual fall away. In terms of distances between windows, you'd normally look for 21 metres between directly facing habitable room windows, or we'd normally look for around 10 metres as well between a window or a side elevation in a house and a garden's boundary. Albeit in this instance you've got a public road in between, so there's an argument you could reduce that. In this instance you've got in excess of the 10 metres between the front elevation of the house and the garden of Carrigorch, and you've got in the region of almost 18 metres between the main frontage of the house where there are habitable room windows and the side elevation of Carrigorch where there is a big patio window, which is why we've suggested there's an obscure, the window which is the sort of offender, if you like, that one that's over that side here. Sorry, this is the superseded plan. So that shows the relationships. You've got 17.9 metres there. So that's why we suggested that window, which is actually on the first floor there. Ground floor shouldn't be an issue because there's a fence here. That window there So that's why we're suggesting it should be obscure glazed, because ideally it should be 21 metres. It's about 3 metres short. What we can do is also ensure that it's fixed and non-opening, because they have got the option of opening that window there, which would be on the side elevation to provide ventilation. So that could then be secured as being in perpetuity and fixed, so it can't be opened if there is concern about loss of privacy. But you know, that's a balance, but we think that's a reasonable balance, given especially that there's a public road in between those two properties. It's not just got open space or amenity space between the two properties.
If it is an elevated site, don't we have to provide more than the 20-22 metre rule? Depending on, doesn't that distance increase per half metre or something, I think?
No, Chair, there's no set rule around that. The 21 metres is a rule of thumb that planners around work to. If it were very, very significantly different levels, different heights, then yeah, you'd look at a greater distance. But I'm not aware of a extra metre for every half metre raise or anything of that definition. I realise the agent referred to a site in Kywent which has significantly reduced dimensions, so 12 metres I think was raised. If it were a brand new development where everybody's new, we are more relaxed on it because you can get at some really good street scenes with a slightly more dense approach. But we'd only relax it to that extent if you've got a new resident moving in facing a new resident. Everyone knows what they're getting. We'd be more strict where you've got existing residents, as is this the case. But as Phil's outlined, we're happy that this relationship's workable with the conditions that we've suggested, and that could be increased to make that front first floor bedroom window non-openable, as well as obscure glazed if members wished.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Louise Brown at the back.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just wanting to ask, I mean, this window itself, it's on the side of the property, not the front, isn't it? Is that right? Or is it on the front?
Do you mean the Carragor existing window we're concerned about, or the new house?
No, I mean the basically between the living room of the other house and basically this one. Is it on the right-hand side at the bottom that you're talking about, or is it that is that one? Is it? So it's the main frontage of the house.
And that would be the secondary window to the roof, which you could have opening there.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So that top one will look is the one that's 18 metres away, roughly, is it, to the living room? Yeah, and that's the one that's going to be
Obscure glazed, yeah.
And it's obscure glazed on that other one on the right-hand side at the bottom, is it?
No.
No.
Because that's not looking towards Carragor.
Oh, I see, yeah. So presumably that will be a bedroom window, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Alan Davis and then Councillor Murphy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, when we visited this site, there were very genuine concerns, and I think if I'd have been living opposite, I'd have been concerned as well. But what I'm pleased about is that the comments that were made at the time, they've obviously looked into those, and they tried to address all of the points that was made. I think this is, the redesign is good. I don't think that there's much of an issue now as far as the particular neighbour is concerned. And I would suggest that we approve this application now because they've done everything they can to mitigate the issues that were there originally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And before I second that, can I just ask a question? You brought it down 200 mil. Is there any scope to bring it down a little bit more? Perhaps the agent would be able to comment on that more. Is it right down to the road level now? I think the garage was quite considerably more than 200
If
mil.
that's the road, and then you can see that the site's there at the moment, that would be the finished site level middle slab there.
Yeah, so it's probably at its lowest point.
Just
Then.
go. You could. The agent is there if the chair is willing to.
Chair, it has been brought down quite considerably from the existing ground level, as you can see, but I'm happy to take it down a touch further if the committee wishes, so that we can bring it approximately level to, I guess the way to describe it would be the position of the road in the middle of the house.
But would that address any overlooking then?
Yeah, I think, well, it isn't going to do a great deal, but I think it would help. So with that amendment, I'd be quite happy to vote for approval.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? No. Councillor Davis proposed that we accept the application, and it is seconded, I think, by Phil. Councillor Murphy?
Yes,
With the amendment.
subject to the offer by the agent to bring it down that little bit further. I'm happy to leave it to practicality, but if it can come down a little bit more, so much the better. It'll get rid of a little bit of the massing.
Thank you. You all in agreement and understand exactly what the amendment is now? So it's been asked for approval and seconded. Could I have a show of hands, please, for approval? No, one abstained. We go now on to page 85, application 01909, and this is in Abergavenny. Right, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Just wait for Councillor Harris.
Councillor Harris is leaving the chamber because he's declared an interest on this application.
Oh, okay. So this is a full application for the erection of an open-sided roofed events pavilion. The structure would be sited within the grounds of Abergavenny Castle. And just for members' clarity, the application is presented today as there are more than 5 objections, and also it is jointly made by Monmouthshire County Council's Museum Service. A number of members were there yesterday, but we'll just quickly run through the site photographs for the benefit of those that weren't. So this is the main entrance to the castle. This is taken from within the grounds. And then next, that's the approximate site of the pavilion. We'll confirm that with the plans later. Next, there's a view looking back to the south. And that's a slightly elevated view then, taken from the higher part of the castle grounds, looking over the boundary wall that's to be retained. So, as stated, the application relates to the grounds of Abergavenny Castle. The castle itself is owned by the Neville Estate Company Limited, and the extent of the site is shown edged in red on the screen behind me. The site has been leased to the town since 1881 as a place of recreation, and has been leased to Monmouthshire County Council and its predecessors since 1971. At present, events are held in the castle grounds using temporary marquees. However, a feasibility study carried out in 2017 helped to deliver the consideration of a permanent covered solution. The pavilion would help during periods of bad weather, in particular the condition of grounds after temporary closures have been erected, used and dismantled. So if we go on to the layout. So that's the layout there. So the structure would be sited on the lawned area north of the outer wall Bailey defensive bank, which, as I said earlier, is sited next to the boundary wall along the northern edge. The building would measure 5.4 metres in height to the ridge, 14 metres in length and 8 metres in width. And if that's Phil, you can just show. So that shows there. You can see there, members, the red line dotted around the building. That was the original proposal. It has been reduced further to officer consultation. So the building, in respect of external finishes, would be a timber frame structure with a combination of traditional jointing and steel connecting detail, partial timber cladding and a high-level glass rain screen. It would also feature movable sliding perimeter screens with steel frames and timber louvre infills. Phil, if you want to pass through, we've got a sort of interpretive photo of what that would look like with those shutters closed. So that's it. The roof would be constructed of natural slate with lead flashings, whilst hard landscaping would be provided by Welsh pennant flagstones. As you can see on the site layout, a new surfaced approach would be provided, as well as a paving solution around the perimeter of the building. In terms of the types of events that will be held, these would be quite varied. They would include outdoor theatre, recreations, wedding receptions, school visits, community theatre and folk dancing, silent discos, and a variety of music events. Therefore, there are a number of key material planning considerations that are weighed up. Two of the most significant are heritage impact and the impact upon local residential amenity. Firstly, turning to principle, to confirm the site is located within the development boundary for Abergavenny. Strategic Policy F5, Community and Recreational Facilities, sets out support in principle for development proposals that provide and or enhance community facilities. And these will be permitted within or adjoining development boundaries, subject to detailed considerations. The grounds of the castle are free to the public and are currently used informally as a play space, as well as an important historical and cultural destination for local people and visitors. It's accepted that the events pavilion would also at times be hired for private functions. However, it is not considered that when used for private events, it would be prejudicial to the wider public's use of the castle grounds. Policy F5 does assert that whilst there is a general presumption in favour of community facilities, they should not erode the character and appearance of the natural and built environment, nor the design qualities of their location. New facilities need to have a good access to public transport, as well as be walkable distances to many homes as possible. And I'll go through now how the proposal is considered to meet these detailed requirements. Firstly, in terms of heritage, the pavilion structure itself has been designed as a modern interpretation of a simple timber-framed outbuilding. It would allow for flexibility given the variety of events that would be held there. The scale of the building has been reduced during the course of the application, as I noted earlier. I would draw members' attention that third-party correspondence has been received with regard to the extent of the reduction. Taking into account the width of the supporting posts, the reductions would be approximately 0.6 metres in width and 3.8 metres in length. The use of a frameless glazing in the gables will provide a simple means to protect against inclement weather, whilst also allowing for the benefit of natural light. Owing to the historic setting of the site, a condition would be attached to agree samples of all external materials. With regard specifically to heritage designations, the application is located within the Abergavenny Conservation Area, and the site contains the following: the Grade 1 listed ruins of Abergavenny Castle, the Grade 2 listed lodge of Abergavenny Castle, which is privately owned by the Angel Hotel, the Grade 2 listed wall, gate piers and gates at the entrance of the site, and it is within the registered park and garden, but does not form part of the ancient monument. In response to the amended plans, CAD advised that the proposal would have a moderate adverse impact on the Abergavenny Castle Registered Historic Park and Garden and its setting, and the setting of Abergavenny Castle Scheduled Monument, but this would not be significant. CAD have also concurred with the advice of Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust that there are archaeological features that may be revealed during the development, and have recommended that should planning permission be granted, a condition be attached requiring a written scheme of historic environment mitigation be instigated in order to ensure that any features of archaeological interest discovered during works would be fully investigated and recorded. The Council's Heritage Manager has advised throughout the application process and that the erection of a building in this corner of the site is not considered to be unacceptable in relation to the setting of the listed building and the wider conservation area. The pavilion building would be clearly read as a modern addition and would enable visitors to the castle to continue to understand and appreciate the significance of the designated asset. It's recognised that the pavilion would obscure some views towards the town and beyond, in particular views to the north. However, this would be to a limited extent, particularly given the reduction in height, and only when adjacent to the proposed building. In terms of residential amenity, as I stated earlier, the castle grounds are used as a place of recreation and hosts a number of events already during the year, including the food festival and other music and cultural events. However, it is accepted that a permanent pavilion proposed could be a clear focus for future events. The proposed pavilion would be sited within 30 metres of some dwellings to the north, with the perimeter of the edge of the gardens approximately 10 metres away. The application was originally submitted with a speech-only noise survey, and the Council's Environmental Health Officer expressed concerns that the extent of disturbance to nearby residents will be interdependent on a number of factors, and these would include the nature, frequency, duration, loudness and finish time of the events, and the management in place to control noise levels. The applicant has accordingly provided a revised and reduced schedule of events, dividing them into speech-only and music events. Members will have seen the full schedule set out within the officer's report. However, of note, the revised list would see just 4 amplified music events per year to finish by 9 p.m. Sunday to Thursdays or 10 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays. Therefore, it is accepted that there would be an impact on local residential immunity with regard to noise, primarily during evening hours. It is considered on balance that, subject to appropriate planning conditions, the impact would not be unacceptable. An independent noise survey for outdoor events has been provided to the Council from a third party. It concludes that the impact of speech-only events could be more than moderate and suggests a significant impact in respect of music events. However, members' attention is drawn to a crucial consideration that forms part of the current use of the site and weighing up what is proposed with the existing use and the existing premises licence. In 2006, the premises licence issued that permitted music, live or recorded, to be played anywhere in the castle grounds up until 11 p.m. of any day of the week. Whilst a separate licence would be required for the pavilion and restricted hours to align with those controlled through planning condition, this is nevertheless an important factor when determining any increased impact above the existing situation. For the reasons, therefore, whilst the findings of the third-party survey work are noted, it does not change the conclusion set out with the officer report that the impact of the pavilion can be acceptably managed through planning condition. Owing to the distances of the properties to north and the reduction in height of the pavilion, it's also considered that the pavilion would not be overbearing, and similarly that the retention of the stone boundary wall would not give rise to loss of privacy. In terms of highways considerations, the existing access to the castle grounds for both pedestrians and vehicles is provided through the gate directly off Castle Street. No objection has been received from the Council's highways team. The castle does feature an existing gravel park area within the castle grounds that provides unmarked spaces for up to 16 vehicles. Additional spaces exist, although not formal, for parking of bicycles. Therefore, whilst vehicular parking at the site is limited, it is sustainably located close to the town centre and is within 50 metres of the Castle Street public car park, which also has a wheelchair-accessible route to the castle grounds. The town of Abergavenny is also well served by the train station and the main bus station, as well as the bus stop car park, which is approximately 250 metres from the application site. So it's therefore considered that because of the central location, the site is not dependent on private motor vehicles, and in particular for a number of local community groups that would utilise the pavilion, it would be within easy walking distance. This is in line with the recent updates to Planning Policy Wales, which seeks that the planning system should enable people to access jobs and services to shorter, more efficient, sustainable journeys by walking, cycling and public transport. Turning to biodiversity, it is noted that the castle grounds and surrounding vegetation have high potential for biodiversity. A small bat roost in the lodge has previously been confirmed. Therefore, the primary consideration with respect to biodiversity is light spilling onto these trees along the drive and the top of the existing wall, which could be used as a foraging or commuting route by bats. Owing to the amount of lighting proposed, it has been confirmed that the requirement for formal survey work is not necessary in respect of protected species by the Council's biodiversity officer. However, it is considered appropriate to attach a planning condition that would remove normal permitted development rights in respect of lighting. Therefore, in conclusion, the proposed events pavilion has required a particularly careful balance of all of the relevant material planning considerations, as I've discussed. Of notable significance is the impact of noise disturbance to local residents, as well as safeguarding the historic environment. Whilst acknowledged that there would be some impact on both of these material considerations, the impact can be acceptably mitigated through planning conditions. Therefore, for the reasons set out and the conditions set out in the officer's report, the application is presented to members with the recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for a very detailed description of the application before us this afternoon. And we also have 2 speakers for this application. If you'd like to take the stand first, please, and you have 4 minutes. Thank you. Please state your name.
Good afternoon. I'm Stefan Horowski and I'm speaking on behalf of the local residents. To be clear, the objectors are not opposed to the pavilion being built in the castle grounds, but they strongly object to its proposed location. The main objections are the intolerable noise from planned events. The pavilion would be too close to residential properties and too large for its chosen location. The lack of toilets for the new building, and the pavilion will be a magnet for antisocial behaviour. The problem of noise is the biggest concern to the objectors. Although we consulted with the applicants as far back as 2017, our worries over noise were ignored. A noise impact assessment was commissioned by the Museum Service, but only for natural speech. This report underestimated the anticipated noise levels and did not include any readings for music, wedding and private party events. To add insult to injury, the Environmental Health Officer was happy to accept up to 17 such events per year, which equates to loud music every weekend throughout the summer season. Requests for a more thorough noise assessment were rejected, and the objectors were left with no alternative but to commission their own report. Unsurprisingly, based on codes of practice, the predicted noise levels for music, wedding and party events will result in severe intrusion into local residents' properties. This would extend to the retirement flats at Pegasus and Plantagenet Courts. In the summer months, residents will either have to keep their windows closed or put up with the excessive noise. The proposals do not satisfy the planning policies that protect the quiet enjoyment of your home. You visited the site yesterday and saw how large the pavilion will be. Although reduced in size, CADU still maintain that it will have an adverse impact on the registered park and garden. There is only one toilet on the site to serve an expected 120 visitors to the pavilion. These facilities are woefully inadequate, and the lack of provision has not been properly addressed by the applicants nor in the officer's report. It is easy to gain access into the castle grounds at night. The pavilion is highly likely to become a magnet for antisocial behaviour. The use of shutters to close the sides will not be a sufficient deterrent to prevent vandalism. Under normal circumstances, one would have expected these issues to have been taken more seriously. The applicants should have obtained further information to prove that their proposals would not cause an unreasonable impact on adjacent properties. The local plan policies EP1, S17 and HE1 have not been satisfied, and the application should therefore be refused. To conclude, I would stress again that the objectors are not against the pavilion, but they do oppose its location. It is possible to build within the walls of a scheduled monument, as we did for the Priory Centre in Abergavenny. There are other sites within the castle grounds which could be considered and which are further away from neighbouring residential properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We now have the applicant. Please state your name, and you also have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Rachel Rogers. We would like to build this events pavilion to enhance cultural provision for residents and visitors to Monmouthshire. An events feasibility study took place in 2017, which concluded a covered structure would be a unique community asset. It will provide opportunities to bring arts and culture alive in partnership with community groups and local businesses, and will contribute to the sustainability of the site. Deciding the best location for the structure demanded a careful balancing of issues: the historic nature of the site, the proximity of the neighbours, and ability for all users to practically access the structure. We considered the construction type. The one selected will have a low impact on the site. Whilst we expect it to last for hundreds of years, it could, if required, be dismantled, leaving little trace. We are not proposing a new or radical use. Abergavenny Castle has been publicly accessible since the 19th century, when there were music events, fruit banquets and waltzing competitions. 21st century events include historical reenactments, outdoor theatre and stargazing. We understand our neighbours' concerns and it is not our intention to cause distress. It is therefore important to be clear about what this structure is not for. It is not a venue for large concerts. The central area of the castle grounds on the other side of the rampart remains the designated space for this. Its principal use will be for spoken events during the day, for example, for visiting schools or for community group hire. In addition, for spoken evening events, for audience cover, for outdoor theatre events if it rains, for learning and cultural events, for example, historic lectures, food and drink events limited to 4 events annually. For this reason, our noise impact assessment considered speech-only events. We recognise that objectors have had their own music assessment carried out. However, our proposed music events are in the main smaller in scale. We appreciate that noise from music can be loud, and our approach has been in line with officers' recommendations to limit the frequency and timing of events. So small and medium music events up to 4 times a year. Weddings also up to 4 times a year, but these would not be evening wedding receptions, but would be limited to the formal ceremony and afternoon reception. Music would be limited to accompany walking down the aisle during the register signing or background music during the meal. We have proposed limited formal receptions per year, with music limited to accompaniment and background music. 4 daytime only events, for example, nostalgic dances to encourage the older age group to attend our events. And a one-off school folk dancing festival, which takes place in the central area and would only move to this area in the case of wet weather. We have considered how we ensure measures are in place to prevent nuisance. The full list has been submitted, but includes a responsible person present during events, strictly enforced finishing times, a responsible person on the gate when the event ends to ensure minimal exiting noise, neighbours given advance notice of events, and a community forum to monitor the events. In addition, an electricity supply to avoid noisy generators, additional toilets, and working with the local youth service to prevent antisocial behaviour. We take seriously our responsibilities and any complaints we receive. For example, a complaint about an evening wedding reception led to a change in policy relating to weddings. We are mindful of our role as a community-focused organisation and our responsibility as guardian of this historic site. We've therefore consulted with a range of people during this process, including the Town Council, Civic Society and Local History Society, local businesses and community groups, local residents and users of the castle grounds. We sought advice from CADU to ensure least impact on the castle site. Compensatory measures will also be made, for example, contrasted paving to show where historic paths run underneath, and installing information boards so visitors can better understand the historic garden. We have secured over 97% of the funding from external sources for this project. By accessing these funds, we have demonstrated how the work is delivering local and national strategies. These include the North Monmouthshire 5-year plan and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. To conclude, the Events Pavilion is proposed for small, medium, community-focused events on the same lines as the castle grounds are already used. Large-scale events, which are rare, will continue to be focused in the central area. We have demonstrated we are willing to compromise and have modified our scheme in order to ensure the impact is as low as possible. Going forward, we welcome the opportunity to work with local residents and businesses in a positive manner to ensure this pavilion is an asset for all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. Thank you. Most members were there at the site visit yesterday, and I think we've had a very full and accurate description of what is considered on this application. Abergavenny members I will take first, and I believe Councillor Powell, is it in your ward actually?
Well, that is in the actual application is in Councillor Woodhouse's ward,
But
the
you're
rest
adjacent.
of the castle is in my ward.
Right,
so
I'll
yes.
take your first comments then.
Thank
please,
you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I've thought about this a lot for quite a time now since it came, and I'm quite it's difficult to decide because you can see all sides of it. But I am unhappy about the detriment to the amenity for the local people surrounding it. And at the moment, we have a big event of the food festival with a big marquee, but that's once a year. We don't have many of those events. But if this is built, it's going to be used on a regular basis, which is going to add to that. The other thing that I'm a bit concerned about is that it would detract from the setting of the castle. And although they say that this is outside the castle grounds, the wall that goes all the way around is actually the castle wall. So I would have thought that the whole of that area really was part of the castle. It's, you know, it's an ancient monument. It's in its setting, and I like to think that it will stay like that. Possibly if we could have put it somewhere else, incorporated into the castle as it is in some other castles in Wales where they have blended it in, I think I might have found it more acceptable. But where it is, I'm sorry, but I can't support this, and I would like to propose a refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have to say I agree totally with Councillor Powell. As somebody who lives near a facility which gives off a lot of noise, it can have a devastating effect on your quality of life, as I found to my own detriment and to my wife's health. I don't understand why this facility has to be as close as it is to the houses. I would have thought this probably in the worst place it could possibly be, not the best. There will be a significant impact on the neighbours as far as I can see, a significant impact on the outlook from the council itself, and I would second Councillor Powell's proposal. I would refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Anne Webb and then Councillor Howard afterwards. Thank you.
Yes, despite agreeing with the previous two speakers, Chairman, thank you. We've got some details of the finishing of the events, but we haven't got any details of the start of the events. I mean, they could start at 6 o'clock in the morning, as far as I'm concerned, with these hours, and I'd like that confirmed. Thank you.
Can you comment on that, please, officers? Or Andrew, thank you.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We could, you know, if members are minded to approve, consider an introduction of a start time. Perhaps that could be agreed by the delegated panel if that was the course that members chose to approve. Yes, it's a fair point, Councillor Webb.
But also, I believe they want to do school children or events, so it would obviously be in the daytime as well. So it's a little bit open-ended, I think. Councillor Howard, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have some difficulty with this one because in terms of the design of it and the location, I think it is the best location in terms of its impact on the SAM. But the problem for me is the amenity one that Councillor Powell raises, and I hear what Andrew says about the fact that there are licences for events to take place on the site, but I mean ultimately the licence is a matter for public crime and disorder and the prevention of nuisance, and we're considering the impact of development on neighbours, and the other matter is that the licence can be revoked and planning permission can't. And I think that since it's likely that most of the outdoor events will take place in the summer months when the residents closest to the site are going to be most likely to have their windows open, then I think that's when the greatest degree of harm could happen. I'm grateful to the objectors that they've gone to the trouble of commissioning their own noise report, because very often that's a criticism that no evidence is brought forward to substantiate claims. It's a pity that we haven't got a professional review of that report, so we can consider it in tandem with the applicant's report as well. But I'm afraid for me, where there's an element of doubt in how it might affect the quality of life of the nearest residents, then I err on the side of caution, and so I shall have to support the motion to refuse with regret.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Louise Brown.
Yeah, I think I wasn't expecting to speak, actually. I don't think I put my hand up, but I think I would like to speak later, but I'd like to listen to a bit more of the debate. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to add to the debate? Councillor Becker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is a concern about the amenity, and I think it's a valid concern. However, when you look at how it's proposed to use that space, I think the benefit to the community as a whole is far greater. You think of children visiting during the day on school trips. You think that if it is used, it is not for the large events about which the residents are concerned. So I accept that if that kind of an event were to be held there, I think there would be a problem. But as that's not what we're intending for it, I think it's a very nice building that adds something to the site. So I'm actually very much in favour of it. So.
Right, thank you, Councillor Becker. Now, Councillor Brown, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, you know, in terms of amenity, there's a restriction of hours, and I'm just wondering if there, as we've got our environmental health officer here, whether you can actually restrict the amplification of the music as well, you know, because obviously that would help in terms of the amenity side. Looking at where the structure is, I can't really see anywhere else it could go in the castle site, because if it was at the top of the site, it would be too intrusive there. So where it's located, I think, is the best place for it to be located. But I just wonder, I mean, in terms of amenity, there has been looking at the hours of concern. They did mention additional toilets as well, and I think that's important, because if you've got 100 people there in one toilet, there's going to be a bit of a queue there. And I think that would be, I'd like a response back on that if possible, joking apart. But I think I would like to know if it's possible to actually assist in terms of restricting a condition on the actual amplification of music. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. I could ask Mr. Owens if you'd like to comment on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think the extent of disturbance in nearby residents has to be independent, as Andrew has said, on a range of factors, including not just the loudness, but also the duration, the frequency, the finish times, and the event management proposed. Environmental health, we get involved in these applications to consider, is a development likely to give rise to an unacceptable risk of harm to amenity and health of nearby residents. Initially, in mid-December of last year, we assessed a report submitted by the applicant, and whilst we did not object to speech only, we certainly did raise concerns about the impact of the music events. And no finish times were proposed, and no noise impact assessment was provided. Subsequently to that, I believe the applicant listened to our concerns and submitted the further event detail in January 2019. And in that proposes and made significant changes on event finish times and the frequency and clarity regarding the management. To answer your question directly, Councillor, yes, if and when there was a music event at the pavilion, it would certainly be audible at the nearby properties. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so the balance which the applicant has tried to propose is by limiting the number of those events, with a background, of course, that under the premises licence currently and since from 2006, anywhere in the castle grounds can be live and amplified music until 11 o'clock at night. So on that basis, whilst Environmental Health and we made clear our reservations to the Planning Department, we felt that we weren't in a position to object to the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Owens, for that statement. Andrew, right, you want to come back again, Andrew? Thank you.
Yeah, it was just a comment on the provision of toilet facilities. There is an existing facility within the site that could be brought back into use. That's something that could be considered should the application be passed. There's I haven't got the exact location within the site, but there is a facility that could be brought back into use within the castle grounds.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to, because I really, unusually for me, can't make my mind up about this one. I really can't. I think the lack of toilets would restrict its use, so any concerns about rowdy events, so sort of encapsulated in that, would be unlikely due to the restricted toilet facilities. And I think it would be more likely to be used as a meeting place rather than an entertainment venue in reality. I'm not absolutely convinced it's in the right place, and I can see problems that potentially associated with it, even though in my mind I'm discounting them. So I think on balance, I'll probably vote against it, although I could change my mind between now and you asking for the vote, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Dovey, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I remember when this was put or brought before the committee as a proposal, and many of the things that we're talking about now were raised by people who attended that, especially the venue being used for things like weddings, etc. I don't know whether it's big enough for a good wedding bash, to be truthful. The other thing is, well, of course, if you have a wedding and you've got licensing there, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to restrict the hours that the ceremony and the after proceedings will take place. I think you'll end up with probably hiring toilet facilities in, and they'll be stacked up against the side there. I think perhaps if you looked again at what the activities you wish to put on there, it might make it more suitable. But I think if you're talking about making it the sort of venue that you will have a group on there, or a big wedding on there, or something or other like that, those facilities are not suitable for that. And you've got to bear in mind, in town, there are facilities that are purpose-built for this, for those sort of activities. So I think perhaps, for me, if you were going to say, well, we're going to have weddings and musical events, and attract a big number of people there, I don't think that is a fit for it. But if you look again at what it was originally planned for, as I recall, its activities didn't spread quite as widely as that, and have the possible impact on the local people around there. So if the activities can be made to fit the design of the building, I probably will vote for it. But if they are as they are at the moment, I won't.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. Mark, you wish to comment?
Yeah, Chair, only really briefly to just draw members back to what Ms. Rogers said as the applicant at the outset, which was around what the intended use is. I think there's risk that the whole debate gets distracted by some big events which aren't actually what's proposed. So she was talking around things like community group hire, school groups, outdoor theatre events, food and drink, but only for a year, and other events being small scale. So I think I just urge members to be mindful of what the intention is there. In this particular case, we have greater control in that regard because the council is the applicant. So it sets, not via planning committee or us as local planning authority, but the council will set what the building's used for and can self-govern it in that sense. But I just wanted to bring it back to what is actually proposed.
Thank you, Mark. And it's like anybody applying for anything. You can say yes or no, depend really what the application is for. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, sorry to come back, Chair. The existing use of the site, we have marquees there, don't we? And these sort of events that we're worried about take place in those marquees anyway, on probably not that many occasions, but this isn't planned to be that many occasions. And so the potential for loud music can go within the licence for up to 11 o'clock. Now, so it can happen anyway.
Yeah, that's my understanding, Chair. There are marquees used within the grounds of the castle, albeit not very frequently. I wonder, Chair, with your permission, if you might know more about that from a licensing angle.
Thank you, Mark. Matthew?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been fortunate enough to cover Abergavenny for a number of decades. There's certainly a number of community events in the castle grounds which tend to be in the open air. Albeit not at this particular location, but closer to the castle itself.
Right, thank you. I think the trouble is that is the whole issue. It is the residents that are close to the actual building that is calling it all into question, not events that are somewhere else. Nobody else wish to comment? Did you wish to
Could I
comment?
just say, Chair, that was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rowan.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, the premises licence, as I understand it, covers anywhere in the castle grounds until 11 o'clock at night, Monday to Sunday.
Thank you very much for that clarity. Quickly, Jess, and I'm going to go to the vote.
Just to reiterate, let's not take away permission based on something that we think that those residents are going to lose, which they could already lose under the current system anyway, because the permission is there. You know, think about what we would be taking away from the community if we don't give them this, if we don't give them this space in which to do these things. So,
Maureen has moved for refusal, I believe, Councillor Powell. Do you have a seconder for refusal? Councillor Davis, could I have a show of hands for refusal, please? Eight. Right, 8 for refusal. Those in favour of the application? Right.
So, Chair, could you could committee confirm the grounds for refusal?
Who is going to speak on those actually? Councillor Powell, if you would, please.
Yeah, the detriment to the amenities for the local people, and that it would detract from an ancient monument. Will that do? Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, Chair, it's okay in the sense of their planning considerations. I don't want to labour the point. I would just comment that Cadw's not objecting in terms of the ancient monument, is my understanding. But if that's what members feel, then those two reasons, both of those, then that's what it is.
So that will mean it will come back again?
Yes, Chair.
At the next application?
Yeah, it comes back to the next meeting for those reasons for refusal to be confirmed.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Mark. We now go to 42, page 55, and we will then take, directly after that, we will take also 00168, because they're both in Raglan, and as I've declared my interest with the things in Raglan, I shall go out from the chamber and Vice Chair will carry those two so that I don't have to come back and forth. Thank you.
Right, we're on to Castoria Avenue in Raglan. We've been here before. This should not take very long.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was one we looked at yesterday. It's one that came up last year, if you remember, and was subject to an appeal. The previous scheme was for a larger 2.5-storey house that was refused, went to appeal, but was allowed recently on appeal. So before the appeal was decided, the applicant put in a revised scheme for a smaller dwelling, which is what members really would have desired really from discussing the previous application. So if I just run through the plans briefly, that's the lower part of the garden, which you're familiar with. That's the adjoining property in Ethley Gardens, I think it is, yeah. There's the site itself. It's a big wedge-shaped site, unique opportunity almost there, really. It's a bit of a strange one, and there's a hedge at the bottom of the garden which divides it, which will come out, or I think it's already come out, which makes the site a lot bigger. And that's how the dwelling would sit within the site, an L shape. Main elevation would be 2-storey with an extension to the southwest side, which would be 1.5-storey with a garage below and a bedroom above. The bedroom would look towards the bottom end of the adjoining garden, but it is the bottom end, not the more usable part of the garden. It's still 4-bedroom, but they are much smaller rooms, and there's no rooms in the roof now. That's the first floor. Yeah, they haven't scanned very well, but that's brick rather than timber boarding or anything like that. We've got some better representations coming up, which are in 3D. So that helps a little bit more. It shows that the dwelling is now a more conventional 2-storey dwelling. And then we've got the previous scheme, which was refused on appeal, which was bigger and 2.5-storey. Sorry, allowed on appeal. I didn't know what I said then. And then it was much bulkier. So access is reasonable. There will be removal of 2 of the 8 birch trees on site, but the remainder will be retained with a no-dig method for the driveway to help maintain and retain those trees. And 2 new trees would also be planted to replace the 2 that have to be removed. I'm not sure we've got, there's one more slide to show the bulk of the one that's been replaced compared to the, I'll leave it on the slide that shows the proposed dwelling. So it's a lot better. I think it doesn't impinge upon the amenity of neighbouring properties. There's sufficient space between windows and walls compared to gardens and other windows of adjoining properties as set out in the report. So we'd recommend approval subject to the Section 106 to secure an affordable housing contribution. Thank you.
Had this been the original design, I think most of you would have agreed we would have passed it at that stage. Wouldn't have had to go to appeal, it would have already been built by now. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd move approval. I read the inspector's report, looked at read the considerations. I know we didn't defend it, but that said, I don't think it would have made any difference. This is probably what we would have asked for in the first place. So rather than waste time on it and try and turn the tide back, I think we ought to recommend approval. So that's what I move.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
I'd like to second that. It's a pity we're in this situation now. Would have saved an awful lot of time. But there we are. It's big, but it fits on the plot. The other one was very big. This is better.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Nobody else has indicated. Oh, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a much better scheme, and I just hope that the applicant decides to go with this rather than the other one. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. And me. Thank you. It's carried. We're now going to go on to the last application this afternoon. It's number 00168, which is Farm Holdings on Chepstow Road, Raglan. Who's doing that one? Ossifer Jones? No, we're doing it now. Listen, come on.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So, this is a full retrospective application for the change of use of agricultural land to a mixed use of car park and agriculture. So the site relates to Raglan Farm Park, which members have visited a couple of times fairly recently. It's located just outside the village of Raglan along Chepstow Road. So that's the main entrance to the site you can see on the screen. And that's the view looking down there towards the car park that's been formed that some of the members will have visited yesterday. So the next slide then just will show, you can see it, perhaps Phil can help, the extent of the site. So the overflow car park's been formed immediately to the existing boundary hedge line and measures approximately 0.26 hectares. As you have seen yesterday, it's finished with a gravel surface. The development is considered justified to support the ongoing rural diversification, which forms part of the family activity and recreational use there. The car park's within the main group of buildings and hard standings, as I say, benefits from screening via the mature hedgerow along the eastern boundary. So for those reasons, it's considered not to have an adverse impact on the wider landscape and represented to members for approval.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Webb.
Whilst I agree with the officer's recommendations, not much time has been given. The application was only valid on the 5th of March, and so therefore it hasn't really given time for the Community Council to respond or anything. It's less than a month.
Sorry.
Do you see what I mean? It's only just a point of just. But they don't meet that. Anyway, there we are. I recommend approval.
Councillor Evans. Thank you. Anybody? And hold on, I'll come to you in a minute. Andrew.
So, thank you, Chair. Sorry, one thing I should have mentioned, it wasn't in the officer's report, but it's come in subsequently. The Council's Highways team have raised concerns with it, indeed an objection, owing to the lack of supporting information in respect of the application. And although whilst noted, that doesn't change the officer recommendation. It is retrospective, it can be seen in situ, and we don't consider that the car park, which uses the existing access arrangement, causes any highway safety harm.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think I would like to have a condition added on to the ones, because there's only one condition there. Perhaps because when we went to the site, we had problems with hitting the branches of that tree, and I just wondered whether there could be a condition or an informative to ask for the tree to be pruned for highway safety access and leaving the site, because obviously there will be some vehicles that are a bit higher up, and I don't think it's unreasonable to say that, because that actually restricts that access or could damage vehicles. Thank you.
The only thing is, Louise, that tree was on their property. It's not a highway issue. It's a personal property issue. But I think you're right, but it's not a highway issue.
Chair, we could add that as an informative, perhaps.
Okay, we'll do it. It's going on as informative. Right, is anybody moving its acceptance, please? Thank you, Councillor Webb, seconded by Councillor Evans. All those in favour, please show. Right, that one's approved. We'll get the chairman back in now. That's done 2 in 7 minutes.
It's all right. Right. Right, we have dwindled a great deal since I was last in here. Page 123, and this is 00030 in Bulwark, Chepstow. Craig, thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application is at 30 Somerset Way, Bulwark in Chepstow. It is for the change of use of a semi-detached property into a house of multiple occupancy for up to 6 adults. If you look, this is the location plan. Oh, sorry. This is the location plan which shows the location of 30 Somerset Way. Planning committee members were there yesterday on site. You see it outlined in red. Let's go to the photos. This is the front of the property. This is the rear of the property. From this photograph, you can see the parking provision. So it does have parking provision for up to 3 dwellings. This is at the rear of the property, this is. This is the floor plans, which shows the development. So on the ground floor here, you can see there's 2 bedrooms to the left there, which have been converted to self-contained units, a shared living dining area, shared communal kitchen, a shared bathroom, and a garage utility room on the side. Again, on the first floor, there are 4 self-contained bedrooms, so they all have locks on the doors for independent living. The accommodation would be provided by Monmouthshire Housing Association. It would be for people who need temporary accommodation, so they'd be in terms of potentially close to homelessness, so vulnerable people who are looking for that temporary need of accommodation before they get permanent residential accommodation. The application has, as outlined in the report, had a number of objections and concerns raised by local residents. The reasons are outlined in the report, which relates to inadequate parking provision, increase in traffic, noise, and concerns over antisocial behaviour. In terms of planning and our considerations of this application, as outlined in the report, the site lies within a residential area, and this is a residential use. So in terms of land use planning, it is an appropriate use for this site. We do feel that the proposed development, if managed correctly, and obviously that would be managed by Monmouthshire Housing Association, it would be a matter for them to manage the site and to ensure that its occupants are treating the site and the local area with respect in a due manner. There'd be no external alterations to the building, and it would be run as a residential unit, like many other properties in the area, and like any other house of multiple occupancy. As outlined in the report, we do not feel that the proposed development would have an impact on the privacy or the amenity of the neighbouring properties, and therefore we are recommending approval subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Right, thank you. Councillor Watts? Yes, please. Thank you. I remind you, Councillor Watts, you have 6 minutes and then 2 minutes later on to sum up
Thank
if
you,
you so
Planning
wish.
Committee, for letting me speak to you today. My concerns about this are that there hasn't been an adequate kind of consultation from Monmouthshire Housing with the community. So hence you see some of the concerns here, which could have been alleviated, I think, with proper discussion in advance. I know that they say that they will attempt to do so after, but some of the issues here are about the 6 people, up to 6 people. What does that actually mean? I spoke to Ian Bakewell yesterday, and he was saying that they might consider this as office space as well. Well, that changes the entire proposal as far as what's before you entirely. So I have some real concerns about that and the impact that has on the community. I don't think the car parking is adequate. If you've got 6 people, you're assuming then that basically 6 people won't have cars. Why are you assuming that 6 people won't have cars? And the other issue is as well that these people also have very complex needs. And I'm concerned about that. I think that, you need additional space in there for, if you like, a room where they can go, which I guess you could say, well, it could have been the office space, which they're looking to do, where they talk to, say, Kaleidoscope, or whether it's social services or whatever. So these people are really on the margins, as it says, of homeless, and I think that has not been taken into consideration really in the application. So basically what I'm saying is I'm asking you to push this back to the Housing Association with a review to looking at this as 5, potentially 5 people staying here as opposed to 6. I think 6 is excessive. And I think also you've got to take into consideration the dynamics as well. These are people that have no relationship with each other. You're forcing them together in the hope then, and I know it's difficult circumstances, in the hope then that in some way it's all going to gel. And I think that needs to be considered as well, Chair. So that's pretty much it. Have we got any, I'm not sure if have we got any diagrams at the back of the property?
In what way?
Well,
There's a photograph.
you've got a photo of the car parking, but it doesn't really account for then the access point as well. So if you've got potentially 6 car parking spaces, you're not really showing the exit. Yeah. So if you look, the access would be from Western Avenue, and then you're coming off Western Avenue into the garages there, and then basically you'd have to cut a right into the property. I think I've got some issues with that because I really don't think there's adequate car parking space for potentially 6 people or an office staff member, whether it's 1 or 2 people. So really, Chair, you know, those are my considerations, and it's not often I rock up at planning. I normally let you get on with it. I don't mind you too much, and I don't complain very often. But I know that the community, if I may say this, are a traditional working class community. This is something very different for them. They're rightly concerned about it, and I'm trying to articulate some of those concerns. You've seen some of it, so this is going to be very new for them. The consultation should have been better from the outset. They should have gone round and talked to those people. I've had some reassurances, but it's all after the event. So I think it could have been better. I'm going to rest my case, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Right, thank you, Craig, and I believe also Shirley wishes to comment as well, so I'll call Shirley after. Do you want to do it before Craig?
Oh.
Ladies first.
I just wanted to say that the council actually asked MHA to buy that property, and we used social housing grant to do that because we're very short of shared accommodation for the under 25s. I'm sure you all know that they only get £54.08 a week to go towards their accommodation, and a 1-bed flat is around £82.99. So all that's open to them really is shared accommodation. We had, since April 2018 to February this year, we had 42 16 to 17-year-olds who've presented as possible homelessness, and 178 18 to 24-year-olds. So we are desperately in need of this accommodation. It won't be managed by Monmouthshire Housing Association, it'll be managed by our housing options team.
Thank you, Shirley. Craig?
Just to clarify on the parking, if this was a 3-bed or 6-bedroom, if it was a 6-bedroom single residential unit, not in multiple occupancy, the parking standards says that it needs to provide 3 car parking spaces. So in terms of parking provision, we feel this is sufficient for that unit, even if it was a 6-bedroom house. That's what the parking standards would ask for. We appreciate the point that it could be for independent units. However, given the type of use that it's going to be for, we think that it's adequate for this particular site, and on balance we think that is acceptable. In terms of office space, the application before members today is for a 6-bedroom house of multiple occupancy, and that is what the application is and what is being asked of. There isn't any additional office space in there.
Well, that's just, if I may, Chair, with respect, that's absolutely. The conversation that I had, which obviously grasped my attention, was with Ian Bakewell, and he's effectively saying that it's up to 6. They may not go for 6, I appreciate that, but he's saying it's up to 6, and they may use one of the bedrooms as office space because they wanted the base in the community, because obviously they've got a big stake in Bulwark. So that I know that because conversations I had about the caretaker's cottage at the school, and he was interested in that as well, which never came to anything. So it was a genuine conversation. It's clearly not articulated in this, and that's really what causes me a lot of concern.
Thank you,
Yes, from conversations with Ian Bakewell, it said that the application is for up to 6. Potentially, he said that there could be some sort of office accommodation there. But this application that is before members today is for up to 6 independent residential units.
I interpret that as if you had a 4-bedroomed house, you could say, but you could use 3 as a bedroom and 1 as an office, which is what's implied here, I gather. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, Councillor, this is not the first one in Bulwark. We have had one before, and I gather it's extremely successful and hasn't caused a problem. So having looked at that one planning-wise before, I'm assured that we can manage them properly.
I think Ian didn't actually mean an office where somebody's going to be going there and working every day and be parking a car. What he meant was if it was a concern that we were putting 6 people in there, we could put 5 and leave that room so that staff could go when they have got management issues. They have somewhere that they can go.
Sorry, Chair, can I just chip in? I think that's muddied the waters unhelpfully in terms of the office reference. So just to reiterate what Craig said, what we're being asked to consider is a HMO for up to 6 individuals with 6 bedrooms, and that is what you're being asked to consider. I don't think I have to declare an interest, given that I manage housing as well. But this is something that we'll be managing within the housing service. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I have some concerns and I would like a little bit more reassurance on this particular issue, because when I was a councillor in another authority, there was a number of houses in my particular ward that were being purchased by it was admittedly a private landlord, but one of the issues is that they had all young people together next to families and so forth, and they experienced problems with drug usage and antisocial behaviour and noise and so forth, because it wasn't managed very well. And really the best management is to have a mixture of ages in these type of properties. So I'm a little bit concerned about, I would like a bit more reassurance about how these properties are going to be managed, because they're among houses where they're normal families, and I think you've got to take account of that and make sure that they are managed properly, because of the fact that I noticed there was a pushchair next door, and obviously there'll be children next door who want to get to bed early and so forth. So neighbourhood amenity is an issue in housing, and I think there is a great need obviously for young people's accommodation, and I'd like a little bit more assurance about how you've mentioned there's been successful schemes and how successful they've been and how managed they've been, because sometimes in supported housing you actually have somebody actually living on site, like a support worker or something like that. Now I don't know what's going to happen here. It sounds like if there's an office, that's not going to be the case, but I would just like a bit more reassurance about this, having come across this problem previously myself. Thank you.
Chair, in response, I can only say that, like many things, they can either be managed well or managed badly, but with the issue of the reassurance, it's managed by us, so you know where to find us if you think there is a problem with the management. We'll be fully mindful of that mix and what's in the locality when we're accommodating people, but Shirley's outlined that housing need and some of those figures there. So, the housing team's got expertise in dealing with this kind of thing, so we'd put our trust in them. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Howard?
Thank you. My previous involvement with HMOs has only been in terms of where they've been for student use and where the concentration has been to a degree where it's affected the nature of the community rather than something individual like this. Having said that, I recall an HMO in Abergavenny I didn't know was one until I happened to see different people coming out and asked, and clearly that assimilated into the community and wasn't causing an issue. I understand, well, if I was in the shoes of the resident next door, I would have a concern if it was going to be young people, because I'd worry about music at unsocial times or possibly noises, and I wonder if it might be possible to, if Shirley could give us maybe a little bit of background about how that might be managed, with just some assurance. But otherwise, I take the point there. Single people, what's their other option? Do they try and move away, try and shack up with another family? Do they present themselves as homeless? There is a real need for this, and I appreciate, as with any family, and it needn't necessarily be an HMO to be a problem. You could have a pretty horrid family move and then cause all sorts of issues, and they could purchase a house and certainly couldn't deal with them via the housing options team. So I think on balance, I do support it, but if we could have some assurance about how any issues could be managed and whether that needs to be considered by way of a condition of some sort of, I don't know, occupancy agreement, ground rule sort of thing, or maybe even if there was, I don't know, an sound insulation scheme on the shared wall, something like that. But I'd appreciate it just a little bit more to push me over the edge in that direction.
Thank you, Shirley.
We manage a number of these properties, and I can assure you that Lindsay Stewart, who's here now, is down there immediately that there's any problems, and we haven't had any major problems. If somebody is causing any disturbance, in the end case would be if they didn't behave, they would have to leave. So we do manage all of these properties. We keep on top of it, and we do manage them well.
Thank you, Shirley. I dare say, you know, in most places or tenants are given the ground rules and they have to abide by them, or they know the consequences. Jez first and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting we're talking about the quality of people moving into the house, because we do that with every building we do planning permission on, right? We say, well, the people who can live here can only be nice people, and they must keep their noise down. Frankly, you know, I am mystified why we're even having this conversation. These people are the most vulnerable people in our community. They are the people we should be throwing a lifeline to, not suggesting that they're some kind of detritus that we need to ignore because somebody might get upset. We are going to manage that facility. You know, we have a greater say over what goes on there. And frankly, you know, I'm amazed that we've gone this far in this conversation. I move to approve.
I think it was the local member who was voicing his concerns, but any tenant usually has ground rules anyway. Councillor Brown and Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I think I'm reassured. I mean, I must have had a bad experience with a particular private landlord that didn't manage properties as well as they should do, but one of their solutions was to mix the ages. But as long as we've had a successful record, then I think that's fair enough. And I do appreciate there is a great need for accommodation for young people. But I mean, I think obviously there's going to have to be ground rules, like, you know, so forth. Thank you.
We haven't finished yet, thank you. Councillor Harris?
I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Becker. He said it perfectly. I think there is no doubt about that. These people are vulnerable. We have a duty of care. It's as simple as that. And that's the end of the conversation as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Craig, then Councillor Powell.
Just wanted to give members a little bit more information as well in terms of the numbers of HMOs we have in Monmouthshire. So MHA have 12 shared properties across Monmouthshire. So if they were a significant problem, local members would be aware of them. There's 3 in Cwmbran, 2 in Abergavenny, 3 in Caldecott and 4 in Chepstow themselves existing now. And they're all being successfully managed and run. So, and if they were all these antisocial behaviours, then I'm sure you'd be aware of them as local members.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got one in my estate in Abergavenny, and they're no problem at all. You could have somebody living next to you who's perfectly sort of looks marvellous, you know, well off and all that, and they could be terrible neighbours. It's got nothing to do with whether you're homeless or whether you own your house as to whether you're a terrible neighbour. And I agree. I mean, what Jess said was really, these people need help.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to perhaps state the obvious. It's obvious to us as officers, perhaps not to everyone in terms of how these work. But as with any kind of rented or let premises, the occupiers would have tenancy agreements. So it's managed in that way. Evictions, if there's really particular problems, in the same way as any other property.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Right. Councillor Dovey, did you wish to comment?
Yeah. We were talking about duty of care. I hear what everybody said, but I think Councillor Watts has shown the duty of care as well for his other residents, because he wanted to know how these homes were run. I didn't know how these homes were run, how many we had, and I was trying to ask it, but it's been done now. I was trying to ask Shirley to give us an indication of the number of homes that there are and how they were managed. I mean, the the properties obviously are very well prepared for their use by Mon Housing. They should be congratulated for that, I think. But I also agree with Chairs. You know, a lot of these people, they've fallen on the hardest of times through no fault of their own. And they do need somebody to put a floor under them so they don't continue dropping through a big hole in society. And I feel satisfied now that the management is in place to look after the welfare of the people that are in the homes, and that will ensure that the neighbours should have some security in where they're living. And I'm wholly supportive of it. But I think Councillor Watts did the right thing to start off with.
One thing I'd like to ask, looking at the description there, it looked like double beds. Do you have like married couples or anything go into these at all? Because I know an instance where I know somebody who got into, their marriage was in difficulty and she had to leave the marital home and there was no option. The only way she could go was to look for something like this as like a stepping stone. So we shouldn't all think that it's people out of work or anything like that that are really, you know, on a bad sort of state of all sorts of things. So they are, you know, sometimes the only thing they have to do. Anyway, it's been moved, I believe. Councillor Watts, yes, sorry, you want your 2 minutes to sum up.
Looking on it. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you know, I accept all the points about vulnerable people. You know, people do live on the margins. It is an area of deprivation. In my ward, 33% of the children live in deprivation. But there's a tradition to the community which is obviously changing, and that's changed in recent years, obviously, with, you know, landlords coming in, buying up properties, slicing them up, and then putting in shared dwelling in there. So the complexity in culture has changed from old steelworker families. Now, you know, if you look at that particular street, you know, I know those families relatively well. I visit them from time to time, and they've obviously kind of contacted me because of their anxiety. So they're naturally concerned, as anybody in this room would be, if you had a property next door to you. We can't guarantee the kind of people that may or may not go there, that you get a mixed range of people who are very good tenants and some that are not. My uncle lived in mixed dwelling, and I was talking to the officer yesterday about this. And he was a decent man. He had schizophrenia, but he was a decent man. He had to live on his own. He had children. He was removed from his children, but struggled to get access to his children because there wasn't sufficient space. That's not been accounted for in that communal space. I don't see that. The other issue I've got is, as well as I think that, you know, you only have to, and I remember from that experience, you only have to have one person, so for example, who is unfortunately becomes addicted to I remember there was a case where the other tenant was addicted to heroin. Effectively, that completely upset the whole environment. Now, what I know is that removing that person isn't a straightforward process. It can be complex and difficult and time-consuming. So those are my concerns for the residents that I represent, that they might have to endure some length of time where it potentially, and I'm not saying it will be the case, but potentially may or may not be the case. And I think I'm only just doing my job here in representing some of their anxiety. The other point is, Chair, I think that, I go back to the original point where it comes to consultation. That, you know, we have a duty to consult with people in advance and afterwards, and I would only hope, because I get the measure of the meeting is that you will pass this, that consultation will continue with the people in that vicinity. So, you know, we can be good neighbours, or we can be bad neighbours, ignoring the needs and what those people say if they have any anxieties. And I would just say this, the person next door is an 80-year-old lady. An 80-year-old lady. So you can imagine what her family must feel having that next door, potentially. Now, I could be entirely wrong, and I hope I am wrong. I hope it all works out for everybody. But just from experience dealing with Monmouth housing, and I know it's a slightly different experience, it can be mixed at best. My biggest in-tray of complaints is to do with neighbourhood disputes or car parking.
I think we're going slightly off what we're dealing with. Thank you, Councillor Watts. Does somebody wish to move? Councillor Jez Becker moves approval. Seconded by Councillor Powell. Show of hands for approval, please. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now go to page 67, that's 01784, erection of two-bedroom semi-detached houses.
We're just waiting for the skewer.
Yeah.
Just wait for Sue to come back in.
What is he about? He really lost the plot. Next one at Portskewart.
Thank you, Chair.
Craig. Thank you.
Yes, this application is being represented to the Planning Committee. It was here on the 5th of March last month, 2019. At this meeting, members deferred to refuse the application. On this presentation now, you can see the photographs. So this is the plot in there between the house and the fence. This is where the site plan is, where the proposed two dwellings will be located, with parking directly onto the road. To run through the elevations, Phil. These are the elevations. So members considered to refuse planning permission for this development on the basis of design and an overdevelopment of the plot. So the application is presented to you today with 3 reasons for refusal. There's one additional one which is before you in relation to the affordable housing contribution. Because we're refusing the application, we actually have to put a reason for refusal that the applicants haven't submitted in affordable housing. So if it does get approved, they would still be subject to that fee. So the 3 reasons for refusal are: the dwellings proposed as a result of their external appearance, mass and scale would fail to be in keeping with existing form, scale of dwellings adjacent to the site. As a result, the development would be out of keeping with the character and appearance of the area and would have an unacceptable impact on local community, contrary to policies EP1 and DES1 of the local development plan. Owing to their scale and layout, the proposed dwellings would represent an overdevelopment of the plot, in that insufficient amenity space would be retained around the dwellings in comparison to the general pattern of development in the locality. The dwellings would therefore fail to respect the existing form, massing and layout of the area, contrary to the requirements of EP1 and DES1 of the LDP. And fourthly, as I mentioned, the applicant has failed to provide a unilateral undertaking to secure a commuted sum to be used for the provision of affordable housing within the county, contrary to the requirements of LDP policy S4. The applicants have already lodged an appeal to this application, so they are appealing the refusal. So if members are minded to refuse the application today with those reasons for refusal, it would be useful to have some nominees to help with the appeal process to defend members' decision. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Obviously, I wasn't here at the last meeting when this came, so I'll leave it to Councillor Clark.
I'll move refusal in line with the 4 conditions we've just put down here.
Could I have a show of hands for that?
Well, you could have it seconded, but never mind. Okay.
Right, thank you. We're all in agreement with that. 'Cause sorry, I'll want Craig to...
Only to ask if we can have some nominees to help with the appeal process.
No, I wasn't either. So anybody else? Councillor Murphy, how many do you require?
2.
2. Anyone else? Sorry? Right, Councillor Powell and Councillor Murphy will help with the appeal. Thank you. Right, thank you, Roger. Page 103, this is 02040, and this is very, very local. It's just outside the building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, so we all know where the site is. We looked at it yesterday. It's to demolish M Block. M Block's actually got consent under a prior notification for demolition proposal to be demolished. So, strictly speaking, it didn't need to be part of. That's it. It's over in the far left corner. And then the metal shed that was to do with the bus parking area, that's to be demolished as well. That's part of the site with the M Block to the right. Again, same similar shot. That's one of the trees to be retained. It is what it is. And then that's towards the back of the site. And that's where the coach parking area was. They no longer use that now. They've moved to Raglan. And that's the red outline of the site. So it's alongside the existing car park. And you see the two buildings that are within the site. And that's the extension of the car park. The existing car park's down here. So there'd be an entrance way into here and then general circulation and then an exit via here and via there. Actually, no, that's going to be the only exit out, isn't it? And then that shows some of the that shows an area to the rear which will actually provide access to the area where there's pollinator stuff and planting at the back. So there's been a little bit of toing and froing sort of late on in this process. So there are additional conditions in late correspondence which members will have noted yesterday. Highways have concerns in terms of the lack of sustainable credentials to extend the car park. And this has been raised in relation to the travel plan that's been put in to actually support this application. The travel plan outlines various actions that need to be taken into account, and we propose to condition that those actions are actually carried out. That's to encourage employees to car share and promote other sustainable forms of travel to County Hall. It is largely voluntary, but it is something that I think that the council can aspire to and promote. So, but it is something that we should be supporting via an additional planning condition set out in late correspondence. There's also other issues that have been raised by Highways in terms of sustainability, and we feel that they need to be actually added to as additional conditions regarding the electric vehicle charging points that need to be added into the scheme. So that needs to be added into the layout, as well as additional parking stands that will need to be found a location for to accord with sustainability criteria. And we suggest that those are provided within 12 months of the scheme coming into use, but would need to be as additional conditions. So we'd recommend approval, subject to those additional conditions, and also subject to flood modelling, which is currently being carried out after being raised by NRW as an issue. The scheme here that was the FCA that was submitted as part of this application, flood consequences assessment, used data that was a little bit out of date. It was in relation to the original County Hall application. Modelling needs to be updated, and that's being gone through at the moment with NRW, but it should be capable of resolution. So we would suggest that this application is approved on the basis of the additional conditions and that flood modelling being resolved to the satisfaction of NRW. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Who's the local member? You the local member?
No, Val.
Val, you're the next door.
No, Brian's next.
First one to comment. Councillor Murphy.
I'd like to move approval, Chair.
I'll second it.
Councillor Dovey.
With this parking now and the pressure that there is on parking, as elected members, we're not here all the time. I mean, today we had a situation where Maureen couldn't get in. There were n number of people trying to find spaces to get in here. I think there should be an area of allocated spaces for members. I'm not saying for every member. I'm not saying that, because we come and go. But I think there should be a space, an allocated area for elected members to park. And I'm not looking for privilege. I'm just looking to be able to get into the meetings when we get here. If you've got officers coming in, and they've got a full house, if you like, then when you come in at 2 o'clock, there's nowhere for you to park.
Mark?
Yeah, Chair, that wouldn't be a planning issue in terms of how the parking's allocated. That would be one for estates. So we'll pass that feedback on, and that's one for the estates team to look at, but it's not something for us to control via a planning permission.
No, I was aware of that, but I thought this would be a point when there was a fair number of us here as well to raise an issue which I think is fairly important.
I think we're
not
just
looking for privilege or
no,
anything. Just
we're
looking
just
to
dealing
be
with the
able to get
application
in.
as of today for the car park. It has been moved by Councillor Murphy and seconded, I believe, by David Evans. Oh no, you wish to comment, David Evans, sir. Sorry.
I think I'll put the comments of Councillor Devi to Democratic Service Committee.
Thank you, but we'll deal with the application that's in front of us at the moment. So it's been moved and seconded by, who said, Councillor Powell. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please? Right.
I'll have to abstain because I left the room for a short period. Okay.
No, not exactly. We go now to page 111 to 122, 00003, and this is at Llanfoist. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is a full application relating to the former Llanfoist Primary School, which is located along Llanellan Road in the village of Llanfoist. So permission is sought to convert the now redundant former school building into 2 semi-detached dwellings and to develop 2 new build detached properties at the rear of the site. The application is presented to members today as it is submitted by Monmouthshire County Council. So the building is there on the screen. Members may be familiar with it that were there yesterday. There's some additional views showing the existing front boundary wall. And then there's a view looking back at the site, taken from an area of public open space to the rear. And the extent of the site then is shown on your screen. So in terms of layout, one point of vehicle access is proposed to provide access, off-street parking and refuse collection to the 4 dwellings. The proposal would use an existing strip of land, which you can see there on the south easterly boundary, between the school site and the neighbouring property known as Hebron. This would provide a 4.8 metre access road and a 1.5 metre pedestrian pavement. So the school building would provide 2 3-bed properties and then, as I say, with 2 detached, and these would be 4-bed properties to the rear of the site. In addition, the site would also include 3 detached garages with 1 that would be shared by the converted school building properties. Pedestrian access would also be provided to the public open space on the northeastern boundary. Phil point out there for you. So in terms of our consideration, there are a number of things to be weighed up. Firstly, the site is within the settlement boundary of Llanfoist. In addition, part of the site is within the red line boundary, is designated as an area of amenity importance under Policy DES 2. Policy DES 2 sets out a number of detailed criteria that development proposals should meet. It's worth noting that part of the site is, I say, within that boundary, but previously did feature a number of prefabricated units from the school that were used during the 1990s and beyond. These have now been demolished, but their presence does still define the historic extent of the public open space, as you would have seen, Phil, if you scroll back to on the photograph. That there. So that sort of does historically define that space. So the proposed development would include a road and footpath link that the community space can be utilised. and this strip of land is currently inaccessible that runs between the site and the semi-detached neighbour. As such, officers are satisfied that the role of the area as a venue for formal and informal space would be not prejudiced by the proposed development. The conversion of the school building, if we can just have a look at those plans, Phil, is considered to be sensitively done. An extension to the rear of the building is proposed. However, this would mirror the architectural scale and form of an existing rear addition. That's the next one. So you can see there, again, it's mirroring the existing appearance. So similarly, also worth noting that some minor alterations to the fenestration would be required, including some roof lights and extension of existing openings, but these would all respect the existing finishes in stonework and would also include painted timber joinery and natural roof slate. Similarly, the proposed new builds to the rear would adopt a traditional design approach. So these also have referenced the main school buildings. You'll see there the decorative barge board features that would replicate those found on the school building. So for those reasons, officers are considered acceptable. In terms of residential amenity, the closest neighbouring properties are at Clos, you have to excuse my pronunciation, Clos Hengair Ysgol. To help minimise overlooking from House A, which you can see is that with the arrows pointing from, the window serving bedroom number 3 has been moved from the northeast rear elevation to the southeast side elevation. This reduces the angle of views between the house and also into the gardens of these neighbours. No habitable windows are less than 22 metres of each other. In terms of views into 36 Woodland Crescent, although the window in bedroom 3 of House A would only be within 6 metres of the boundary of the property, the garden is approximately 31 metres deep, and therefore the house itself is approximately 37 metres away from this new window. There is therefore plenty of garden area that will be further away from the proposed new house, and privacy distances are considered acceptable. There will be no new windows on the side elevation of House B that could overlook the neighbouring properties on Kiln Road. So as noted earlier, only one point of vehicle access is proposed, that would also serve off-street parking and refuse collection. The access route would utilise an existing strip of land between the existing school and neighbouring properties and also provide a pedestrian pavement. Visibility displays of 43-metre sightlines in both directions would be achieved onto Llanellan Road, and this would be accommodated by moving the existing boundary walls back. However, these would, as you can see, there's a slight, perhaps Phil, if you can point that. Yeah, perhaps that shows it better. Yeah. So that would be rebuilt on a like-for-like basis using the original stone. Disturbance from construction would be managed through the construction traffic management plan, which is set out in the conditions. Having regard to the more recent changes in PPW and more sustainable modes of transport, the village is relatively well served by public transport, and the railway station is in nearby Abergavenny, within walking or cycling distance. The site is also accessed off a one-way adopted highway, Llanellan Road, which is connected to a larger distributor B4269. There is a bus stop on the corner of Woodland Crescent and Llanellan Road, approximately 150 metres from the site. Comments have been received from third parties suggesting that all or some of the housing proposed should be affordable. However, in this case, the amount of dwellings proposed, which is less than 5, means that Policy S4, in relation to affordable housing, does not require the provision of a unit on site. However, a combined commuted sum of £112,000 112,847 has been agreed to be paid towards housing in the local area. With regard to biodiversity, the main building has been identified as a roost species for bats, and accordingly a licence from NRW would be required. The officer report contains a detailed assessment of the mitigation measures, including consideration of the tree tests and appropriate planning conditions. Therefore, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the signing of the legal agreement for the affordable housing contribution, it's presented to members for the recommendation for approval.
Thank you for all that detailed report again, Andrew. I believe Councillor Howard, you're the local member.
Yes, thank you. No problem in principle with the scheme as per my response to the consultation. I am, however, going to ask members to consider a deferral for a small revision. The reason being that no matter of the rear window and the position side one, when I had correspondence with the case officer, the house that's shown to the south there, that had been swapped with the position of the garage, so that the issue of the window overlooking into Clos Hengair Ysgol had been resolved. So it was a surprise to me then to see on the plans that it had been put back how it was, and that it had been dealt with by a window being put to the side. And okay, I appreciate the garden at the Woodland Crescent is long, but it would enable direct views over the rear garden, which you would assume normally is considered to be a more private space than that at the front. So I'd ask for it revision to put the house back in place of the garage for that plot. That would still maintain the path through to the public open space at the side. I just answer Andrew's point there about railway station. Okay, I'll get the whole sustainable thing, and given the amount of developments happened in Landfoist in the past public transport, the railway station isn't a desirable or practical walk from Landfoist. That said, I would also ask then if we can have a deferral for a month for a couple of cross sections, just to satisfy the issues of amenity, that being between the house to the south and 2 Clos Hengair, also the new dwelling on the northern side of the site, and I can't remember the parish name of the neighbour's house there. There is a fair drop in level. So if we can have the first cross section there where the lines you have showing the distance between the dwellings. If you can go back to the layout plans, sorry, Phil. Yeah, and the top house, that's great. Yeah, the house that's then on the northwestern or the northern corner, and the property to the northwest. If we could have just a cross section or just some clarity about floor levels, so I can better judge the relationship between that property and the new one. And lastly, then, sorry to be a pain, because I do pick up on the comments of the person who's living in Sunnybrook about vehicles coming in and out of the site. There isn't currently a vehicular access there, and I think it would be helpful to have some idea of the gradient from that access, with an idea that it would minimise headlights pointing into habitable rooms. So if it's level with the road surface, so that when the car comes up at night time, headlights aren't shining into bedrooms, that would be helpful. But other than that, I accept the principle of development. It's a shame that public open space will be lost. We're having a chat. Well, I don't think there's any way.
Sorry, Chair, we're just having a query. I may have misunderstood what Councillor Howard was requesting, but if the road is more level so that the car headlights aren't pointing upwards, then the site will be raised, which I would have thought contradicts what I assumed the concern was about the levels of the houses compared to the neighbours. I think from memory this site's quite a lot lower than the road. So in terms of amenity impact on the neighbours, you'd want to keep the houses as low as possible, which by definition means the road's going to have to slope up. I might have misunderstood what was meant, but I'm not quite sure how I would reconcile those two things.
Sorry, Chair, I might not have been clear enough. I'm talking about the point where the site's accessed onto Glenellan Road, and I think I just want some clarity that at that point of the access road, the levels are similar, so that you haven't got a car pointing upwards out of a driveway, which would worsen the headlight issue.
Anything else?
Sorry, there was another one as well. We talked on site about boundary treatments, didn't we? Andrew talked about the nature of the one at the fence open to the public open space. I think therefore you'd need a condition to ensure that whatever's proposed as a boundary treatment is retained in perpetuity. And also, could we have a condition to remove PD rights for dormers in the rear planes of the roof? Because otherwise then you could deal with the potential overlooking issue on one hand and then worsen it with another.
Okay, Andrew, anything you wish to comment on now?
Yeah, just a couple of points. Yes, to confirm to Councillor Howard's point, yeah, it was a discussion we had, and yeah, it would be wise to add that condition in regards to the means of enclosure, because it would undo what's trying to be achieved here. Similarly, with the other permitted of outright removals you mentioned, again, that could undo steps that have been taken here. In terms of agreeing some sort of sections and levels, would that be something that perhaps Councillor Howard would be agreeable for the delegated panel to agree to? Yeah.
That would be fine. So you don't wish to defer it at all now, if we can sort that out with delegated panel. Right. That's... Yeah. Yeah. Right, thank you.
Chair, we the case officer set on the report why the layout's best in our opinion as it is. Although one thing, if it's not possible to swap the house on a garage, we could probably get the house attached to the garage. At the moment, there's a walkway between the two, which doesn't serve a massive purpose because you can get around the other side of the house. So you could move the house a good metre to the northwest. We couldn't move that garage any further, or you'd lose the access into the open space. But we could certainly look at that improvement if the two aren't swapped.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew. Right, thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, looking at the conditions, unless I've missed it, there doesn't seem to be one about quality of materials and that sort of thing, because obviously if this site gets sold on, I think that's going to be an important factor, because of the fact, in the same sense we were talking about boundary treatment and so forth being a condition, I think that should be added. The second concern I've got, but I'm not sure whether anything can be done about that within the current plan, is the garages, two garages that look as if they're tandem garages rather than basically normal garages. And there is a problem with, if that's the case, with two tandem garages together, that you know, getting cars in and out. And I thought that our policies in this area were opposed to tandem garages. So perhaps I did mention that point on site. Yeah.
Yeah, just in response to Councillor Brown's point, yeah, obviously it is a tandem garage, but the site does allow for vehicle turning provision within it. So it's not considered from officers' point of view that even with a shared garage like that, as the site makes adequate turning provision, that it wouldn't cause harm to highway safety or cause trouble with vehicle movements within the site. On Councillor Brown's other point regarding materials, then that could be something that could be added as a condition to, certainly with the stonework and natural roof slate, things of that nature, then that could be added, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody happy with all of that now? Yeah. Right, do you wish to move, Councillor Howard? Subject to what we discussed with the delegated
Subject to the
panel.
detail that it goes to delegated panel with the requested information.
Right, right.
And if I can come.
Do you have a second for your approval? Councillor Webb. Show of hands for approval, please. Yeah. Thank you all very much indeed. I just think it was such a shame after going there yesterday. It's taken so long for a building like that to be used for housing. It seems to have gone into a very bad state of disrepair. We have finished all our applications now for this afternoon, but we have the appeals and supplementary guidance. Do you wish to comment on those now, please, Mark?
Yeah, Chair, do you mind if we take the SPG first? Yes. Because it is an issue that's very close to members' hearts. It's seeking your comments before we go out to consultation. It's going to Cabinet Member for endorsement, I think, tomorrow for consultation on affordable housing supplementary planning guidance. So Shirley is going to cover the highlights of the changes, but that's what it's for. Proposal is go out to consultation, and then we'll bring it back to probably to Cabinet in actual fact. So it's got wider interest for adoption.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Shirley.
It's been 2.5 years now since we started taking financial contributions from single dwellings towards affordable housing, so we thought it was timely to have a look to see how successful that policy's been or not. Applicants who are building a single property for sale have been submitting figures for us to carry out viability appraisals. Most of those have either been unviable or viable only for a small sum. We've had a lot of plots through that people are paying 180,000 for. You've commented on those yourselves. It is looking like they're not looking at what the policy compliant money is before they go and do that. So what we've done now is we've proposed to change the method of calculating the sum to make it more equitable and to make it simpler so that the planning officers and members of the public would be able to do it by themselves. The proposed formula that we will have will use the sill rate for the area that the dwelling's in, and that ranges from £80 to £120 a square metre. We would times that by the size of the dwelling, and at the moment with the formula we use, it's the number of bedrooms. That's not really very fair because we have some very large houses that have 4 bedrooms and some very small houses. So we propose to use the size in square metres of the actual dwelling. And then we would multiply that by 58%. And that is the proportion that the landowner developer would pay if the house was on site. That results in quite a significantly smaller sum that we'd be asking for. To give you an idea, a 2-bed property in Chepstow with the current way of doing it, we would ask for about 21,000. With the new formula, that would be reduced to 7. We also have strengthened the parts of the document that advise people to take consideration of planning obligations before buying the land. And all viability appraisals now will be undertaken by the district valuer, and the applicants will have to pay for those. And the viability appraisals will be published in the public domain. We're hoping that with these changes, people will actually pay the money because it will be a more affordable sum. We have, since we started, I think I've done about 185 calculations, but we've only raised 96,000 to date. So we are hoping that if we ask for less, we'll end up getting more. We have exempted single barn conversions because none of them have ever been viable because of the high build costs, but 2 to 4 barns will still be expected to pay a commuted sum. We also propose exempting commercial conversions of 1 to 4 units, such as flats above shops or offices. We are very keen to see these being brought back into use, so we don't want to penalise people by asking for sums that are just not affordable. And the last exemption we're proposing would be for listed buildings of 1 to 4 units. The rest of the document we have just updated data that's out of date and planning policies that are out of date.
Thank you, Shirley. Anybody want Mark first of all, and then I'll take members' comments.
I know that's the highlights of the report, Chair. So the purpose of bringing it to you is any comments if you have any now. Otherwise, we'll get it out to consultation and tell you what the outcome of that is at the end.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Does this have any implications for major developers? Because, obviously in terms of materials for building and so forth, they often get significant discounts in relation to the cost of materials. And, I think, in terms of affordable housing, it seems to be against, obviously you've got experience of this, but against the logic to actually be reducing the contribution as opposed to increasing it in line with, a more realistic appraisal. So it seems to be we're going in the opposite direction I would have expected us to go in. Thank you.
Chair, it wouldn't benefit or affect major developers because the exemptions that we talked about and the way in which we calculate commuted sums apply to schemes of less than 5 dwellings. If you're building more than 5 dwellings, you're providing on site. So a big builder is never going to build anything that small. So those exemptions kick in for 1 to 4 units. Anything bigger is expected to provide 25%, 35% or 60% on site as per the LDP policies, and they'll go through a viability calculation in the same way as before. The only two changes that would apply to those schemes I can think of that Shirley's mentioned are the policy strengthening in terms of they should be taking that policy into account before they buy the sites, which will hopefully strengthen our hands slightly. And also the fact that viability appraisals will be put in the public, which is something committees consistently raised over recent months.
Thank you. I certainly welcome the one not charging for conversion of upper floors in commercial places. It regenerates the town centre and it regenerates for housing, which is sorely lacking in built-up areas for smaller families, and the conversions are there, and I think it's such a shame that those buildings the price has prohibited people doing that. So I really do welcome that. Any other comments, please? Councillor Davis and Councillor Murphy.
Only to say I think it's a very sensible proposal, Madam Chairman, and the exemptions, as you say, I think they are right, and we'll be able to understand it now, which is something I never quite understood how it was worked out. So, and I think it's in the public domain, which is even better. It's available for everybody to look at. So I have no objections to these proposals. I think they make sense. Thank you.
Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I agree. It's they were always being challenged before. We always had disputes over viability. Nobody was ever quite sure where we were. I think this draws a line under that, so great.
Thank you all very much. Appeals, do you wish to do the appeals, Phil?
Yeah, sorry. Let's go back to the previous slide. This is one that Anne knows all about, Councillor Webb knows all about. So what happened here at Ravensnest Fishery, an unauthorised, dwelling really, was being built. It was purported to be a large caravan, mobile, one of those mobile home type units there that have been clamped together. But looking at it, when we went there, I mean, the three of us have been there, it was clear that it was a construction, it was operational development, so it wasn't a caravan. The background behind it is there's a lawful development certificate from the station, a caravan there for use ancillary to the fishery. So in other words, a manager could sort of keep an eye on it for supervisory purposes overnight.
Has it got a certain time as to when it has got to be demolished? I remember seeing it myself, and I'll take in council. And I went up very quickly over a weekend, and I said, "Oh gosh, it looks like the fire's up the chimney, and they've got the three-piece suite already." It was very, very quickly done. Councillor Webb.
Just one quickie. The caravan has actually been removed to another site now, which is the thing that they had permission for. Does that make that permission extinct now? I don't know. Anyway, it's something about to be looked at.
It's a bit more complicated than that, because there was a certificate of lawful use for the caravan before. We'll have to have a bit of a think about that rather than answer on the hoof.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Anybody else comments now?
Yeah, and the other on the
Is there any real point in appealing? Because that was absolutely blatant. The principle was right. They shouldn't have done it. And yet, You know, if you've got the money, goes through. And, you know, I think it's disgraceful.
It's the point I keep trying to reiterate, Chair, that we can't refuse things just because they've done it wrong. It has to be material planning harm. So in this case, planning committee thought that there was in terms of the street scene, but yeah, the inspector hasn't agreed on this one. So in his or her, I can't remember now, report, it is clear that they, you know, considering it as a subjective opinion in terms of design, which is something that we picked up on briefly in discussion last meeting, 'cause it contradicts something that was said in the Raglan appeal. But yeah, there is a point in your deliberations on your activity. It's just that we can't make decisions just because the applicant hasn't gone through the right sequence of events.
It does seem to be that for those that hath, it shall be given. Always.
Well, not always, Chair. The appeal immediately before being an example.
I think we've concluded the business of today, but just one thing I'd like to draw your attention to, discussions we'd had earlier, is we would like to move the June meeting from the 4th of June to the 28th of May, and it's a bank holiday, so we could then have the site visits on the 24th. Any problem for any of you if we give now plenty of morning and there's nothing in the diary?
I'm happy with that because the 4th of June is my birthday.
Actually, school holidays, so it's half term, so I certainly wouldn't be able to come.
Right. Everybody else okay? Right, okay. Just to let you know that that's what we had tried to do. Thank you all, and thank you. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I think we've been, you know, over 3.5 hours, and some members have meetings before they come here, so it's a long day. I feel, and I don't know what the rest of the members feel, that we should have 2 applications per meeting with speakers and the remainder of the applications as normal, and we would definitely get through at a reasonable time. I don't know what the officers think of that, but this is what I'm putting forward for further meetings.
Particularly if you have a evening meeting.
As you can see, there's three members already.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but unless we're made of it, aware of it sometime before the meeting or the agenda is set out, we're not aware of all the meetings and other appointments that members have got following a planning committee. And we all know that planning doesn't usually get concluded in 2 hours because it is contentious. We don't know, you know, in the beginning how many speakers we're going to have, and and we don't always know how long each application is going to take. So I'm sorry indeed if those who've got to hurry now to go to other meetings, but some of that is out of my control. So thank you very much
Madam
for your
Chair,
attendance.
with all disrespect,